Okay, this is FPL Last Resort. I'm not going to try and attempt to do your opening, Alon, because you do it way better. So I'm just going to do it in a sort of smoothie Roger Moore style Bond way, something like that. I'm FPL Richie. Alon, you're back.
I'm back, baby. Post-mortem.
We
Did
just
one
couldn't
post-mortem
keep you away.
yesterday. Yeah, I got to do another post-mortem today. Every day is a post-mortem.
You're on form.
Yeah, I'm in
You
form.
kind of
Yeah.
invented post-mortem, really. That was your thing,
Maybe.
not some surgeon or doctor or whatever.
Right. Yeah, I think so. I think they stole the word from us.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you did. Danny, how are we?
Yeah, I'm good. And a pre-mortem as well. Have you heard of the concept of pre-mortem? Yeah, because it's like a Daniel Kahneman thing, isn't it? I don't know. Maybe that's just where it became famous in his book. Thinking fast and slow. But pre-mortem is also what we live today, and it's what
This is such a damn classy podcast, isn't it?
I mean, I've heard of the book. That's pretty good for me.
Maybe we should all engage in a pre-mortem more often, though. In FPL, what's the worst thing that can happen every time you bring someone in like Calvert-Lewin or Quansah? Yeah. A lot of people didn't do a pre-mortem game week 1 last season, I reckon. So,
That's
but
true.
yeah, bloody hell, Alan. 2 hours, like what was it? Over 2 hours post-mortem last night, and then strapping in for a long one tonight. So
it's just what I do. Locked into my computer chair.
I mean, this is all good. I don't come here to talk about FPL. I come here to learn. That's really what this is, which seems appropriate with two fine, intelligent gentlemen in the room as well. Yeah. So if you haven't, by the way, please do go over after this to check out FPL's post-mortem. They invented that. We invented pre-mortem, probably. No copyrights. But yeah, we'll sort that through. I also want to plug, because we were talking to Alon before we came on, and a couple of interesting conversations. One is kind of Bond related. I'm a big kind of Bond guy. We were talking about Robert Shaw, who was in From Russia with Love and that sort of thing. And Alon has actually another podcast which I never knew about, and it's I listened to an episode this afternoon, and I am a new fan. It also led me and Danny to talk about Games Master, which because we're very 90s men people.
Yes.
And I was just reflecting on how weird that was, but pretty cool as well. Alan, can you tell us about your other podcast? Because I do want to see if we can get a few more people over there.
Sure, yeah, I would love that. It's called Wide Flank. It's a gaming podcast where I feel like we're still always figuring it out. We have a few different types of shows. Once a month we do a dev talk. We talk with a game designer. Once a month we do what we call a mini club. We play 5 different games for 30 minutes each, and then our Discord votes on which one of those to do a full game club episode on, which are like more in-depth on just one game. But the episode that Richie's talking about was like a crossover collab where we did From Russia with Love, from book to movie to game. So that was like a big 4-person collab. But yeah, it's a fun time. I mean, we're learning on the fly. So yeah, I appreciate any listens.
Oh no, that's pretty cool. Yeah. I mean, actually, also I don't think I've seen that, because you know how a few other FPL podcasters, they kind of have other things going on, usually sort of walking or some kind of stuff like that. But yeah, no, gaming podcast, that's a pretty good one. And Danny, you're a relatively keen gamer, aren't you? I'm sure you've mentioned a few things in the past, or at least you have been. So
yeah, I'm kind of a retired gamer, although weirdly enough, I've actually just bought a PlayStation 5, which is
hello.
Yeah, like I'm trying to get a bit back into it, because I think it like helps facilitate a bit of a healthier lifestyle for me. If I'm having like a night where I'm not going to have a drink and I'm just chilling, sometimes you just turn the computer on, and like the last few years, I mean, I used to be a massive gamer, like Nintendo 64,
big time,
absolute Mario Kart, GoldenEye King and stuff, and then Halo, years of Halo and the great years, and Halo 3 and stuff, and then used to play obviously like Pro Evolution more than FIFA, but I got quite bored of football games, and then there was a period where like all everyone played was FIFA, and I just found it a little bit boring after a bit. It was so samey, and it didn't engage me enough. I don't know. I just got a bit bored, and then and then I started replaying like Skyrim not long ago, and it got me back into computers a little bit. So yeah, weirdly enough, PlayStation 5 coming this weekend. So any suggestions for games as well from the chat? Like I like a role playing game and something to chill, and this is my girlfriend, like she actually, like, one of her favorite things is watching me play role-playing games.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Lucky man.
This is why it's like for both of us. I'm like, okay, sweet. Like I get made to play these things, so obviously I like it as well. But yeah, it's one of these weird things where it works for both. So yeah, I don't know. I have no idea what games to get because I'm completely out of touch. But yeah, suggestions.
Nice. Actually, we're talking about kind of very lucky partners in the kind of FPL world, because obviously they're, having FPL widows are a real thing. It is hard on a Saturday morning or a Friday night or whatever it is, especially for Daddy and I, because if pod, then we got Son of a Gun, where we have a chat on a Friday night. There's the deadline where one of the managers in our squad, this is for SKLW, needs to hang around and press the buttons on a Saturday morning. It is a nightmare. So that sort of thing. So I actually just celebrated a 15th wedding anniversary yesterday, so I must give my wife a shout out.
Wow, congrats.
She won't watch this anyway, but nevertheless, good vibes and all that.
But isn't that's the podcast we really need in the world, is FPL wives or FPL widows.
FPL
and it's
wives.
just, they're just talking about dealing with their man who's obsessed with this toxic game and ruining their lives and their marriage.
Mood swings every Saturday when you just
I'm worried about where this could lead.
There was that famous tweet by what's her name, Sophie or something, that was like,
yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? It was like,
Sophie.
It's like, you haven't, don't tell me women have mood swings. Like, you haven't seen a man after his FPL team does poorly, or something like that. It's a classic.
Yeah. So true, to be fair.
Before we, I'm going to ask you both how you sort of feel in the light of the season ending and that sort of thing. But before we do, quick beer check, Danny. It's too early for Alon because it's obviously a few hours different over in the States. But I've got Norfolk Topper, by the way, if anyone's interested, from Barsham. We're still looking for our beer sponsor, and they are a pretty small brewery. So if you are watching, we'll take anything.
Get in,
anything. Something good, ideally, but if not, just stuff.
I haven't opened mine yet because I'm just going to postpone it just for a few minutes so I don't need the toilet too many times during this whole pod. But this is like my new thing, right? It's called Skinny. It sounds ridiculous, but it's called like Skinny. Where am I pointing to?
Skinny, you're holding it up to the window.
Skinny premium lager, right? But it's perfect for the healthy lifestyle, right? It's skinny, so it's like low calorie. It's gluten free, which I need, and vegan, and it's only 4%.
Wow.
And it tastes good. And it's just like Tesco have just started doing it. I'm like, why hasn't someone started doing this earlier? So I'm like, I'm now the kind of the pioneer. I'm the voice.
You know what? I quite like the sound of Skinny Last Resort. That kind of feels like we could sell our rights. The stadium could belong to Skinny, and then Skinny, Last Resort, something like that.
Yeah, you've built up the fans.
Doesn't really work,
Yeah. Topper Last Resort. Nah, it's not. Doesn't roll off the tongue.
Anyway, before we have it, we're going to go and have a very quick look at our game week 38 situations. Does anyone really care anymore? It was sort of 5 or 6 days ago, right? But I mean, how do we feel in the kind of wake of the season? Are you calm? Are you relaxed? Have you forgotten about it all? Are you looking forward to your summer, Alon? What's the kind of vibe?
Yeah, I think the latter there. Looking forward to my summer. Looking forward to some free weekends, more free nights, because we record twice a week, so usually it's just Monday and Thursday nights. I can't do anything ever. Yeah, I mean, I know that I'll be just as excited as ever when the game comes out and whenever mid-July or whatever, looking at prices and getting back into the swing of things. But I very much need the mental health month and a half or whatever away from it, where I would literally think about it 0 times, starting from next week onwards.
Yeah. No, I'm glad that you say that, by the way, because there are a lot of people out there who are already like, I've got basically an addiction. I need to fulfill this. I need to carry on. I've got to play, what is it, the Club World Cup or whatever. I didn't even know that existed until a couple of days ago. But I am maybe weirdly, I'm one of the weirdest managers in the FPL community, probably on this respect, but I obviously avoid Saturday games and go out and do other things.
Right.
I only watch games if I'm actually watching them. I hate the updates and that sort of stuff. I actually really like international breaks, more or less everything other than the actual game. It makes no sense whatsoever. I must actually hate the game, and I love my summer, so I'm fine with that. How about you, Danny?
Yeah, I'm just kind of it's weird, isn't it? Because there's definitely a difference. I think, well, there is for me anyway. Like when the season finishes, if you've had a decent season or if you've had a bad one.
True.
I'm not sure it's consistent what that difference is. I don't know really, because I guess it probably is, but I guess generally, if you've had a really unenjoyable season, you do want to break, but you kind of want to get started again as well in the back of your head in the future, to kind of erase it and start again and stuff. But yeah, it just kind of it petered out a bit for me anyway. So I've just been sort of falling over the edge. It was a good season though. You got to be happy with it and stuff. And yeah, like I sort of definitely looking forward to a break and just having a reset and just forgetting and yeah. The fact that I guarantee can enjoy my weekends and I now have control over my weekends for at least like a good few months,
yes,
which is amazing. So I kind of like, but I always look forward to next season, and I think I always just look forward, and even like when I'm playing in the season, it's kind of my process, maybe more than others, in the sense that like I pretty much, it helps a lot, but as soon as like the deadline passes, I'm just already looking at next week's team and looking at next week and I don't know, like someone was saying, I think it was Andy, so you never realize it so soon, but it's like the fixtures drop in 3 weeks. You know that?
Jesus,
that is fucked.
It's mental, isn't it? Like time just goes so fast. I mean, I'm just going to forget about that, but obviously, as soon as those fixtures drop, that's the content restarting. That's people doing the threads of like
brother.
We'll get the goalkeeper rotation and the cheap defender rotations, regardless of like anything else. But no, it's quite nice. Like I usually always have a holiday like end of June, which again I'm going to Greece the end of June, and things like
hell yeah.
just drop when I'm
like on holiday at the same time.
That sort of thing always happens when I'm just like sitting by the pool with like a beer or a cocktail, reading a book, and then the fixtures drop, and I'm like, I can soak it in, and I'm like, oh, that's sweet, and I have a little glance, and I'll have a little look at, oh yeah, I'll have a bit of Chelsea from game week 1, and then I'll still just leave it for another couple of weeks. But like I will just say, like pre-season is by far my favorite time of the season.
Oh, it's the best. Pre-game week 1 is the best. Yeah.
It feels like there's just endless, because there's so much more to think about than you week by week, because your team is completely open to any players for the whole week. There's strategies to think about, there's players, there's prices, and there's fixtures, and there's just so much, and obviously without all the pain. So it's only as soon as game week 1 starts that it's the pain. So this is kind of the best part of the whole year for me, in the sense that we've got a little break, and then we get to enjoy the price drops.
It's kind of mad, isn't it? As you say, the pre and the post are the good bits. The actual stuff, it sucks. We hate it. It ruins our mood. It turns us away from our kind of wives and partners, and it doesn't really add up, does it? Just going to say hello to a few people who have joined us as well. Good evening to all. I mean, I am 9074. Don't worry. I know we were talking about gaming and other stuff. You haven't tuned into the wrong pod. It's fine. He's only joking, by the way. We know him well.
Okay.
And we have a kind of running thing. You might have seen Stu or Pep on our pod, Alon.
Yeah, I think they were on last time.
We have a kind of running theme that we're interrupting his dinner. So this evening he might not be able to stay for long. He needs to make dinner. So thank you, Pep. It's really helpful to know that. We'll bear that in mind for all future pods. I think, what was he? He's famous for going to an English institution called Toby Carvery, which I don't know how I would explain it to you, Alan.
No idea what that is.
It's where one goes to something that's not a pub, but kind of like a pub, to get a selection of cheap sliced meat.
Okay.
I don't know. Is that fair, Danny?
I was trying to think of like what's like the most typically American food, but then it's also like a sort of kind of niche but kind of popular version of that food, but it's not the best quality. Sorry, Pep.
Do you eat it there, or you bring this sliced meat home? Okay.
Yeah, so it's basically a kind of like a really straightforward roast dinner situation, Actually, by the way, I've really enjoyed the sort of opening 10 minutes of your post-mortem pod where you talked about roast beef.
There we go.
Which Danny, is it your roast beef? Is it your roast of choice? We need to know this sort of stuff. The punters out there don't really care about FPL anymore. So
I don't like roasts. I'm not.
Oh really? Wow. That fits in with the new healthy lifestyle. So.
And everyone will say, "Oh, that's because you don't have the right people cooking the roast." No, trust me, I do. I've eaten some of the best roasts, and they're fine. It's just not my choice. I don't have regular roasts. I have very rare roasts, very rare. But
There
I
you
would
go. I think we've probably lost half of our viewers now.
no, sorry.
Okay. Well, no, fair enough. I'll tell you what. Let's actually talk about what we were here for.
I'll
a little
timestamp
bit.
it. Don't worry. Anyone listening now, it'll be timestamped as soon as possible. First 15 minutes, you can skip that if you want.
You did that last time, right? And everyone was like, "No, that's the good stuff. We love that."
Yeah. Last time you were on, I think I just spoke for too long. That was it. But yeah, it's true.
I like that.
Turns out people don't mind a 2-hour pod. It turns out, which is fine.
Right,
so.
right.
Yeah. Well, we'll try not to disappoint. But Alon, if we're going to start with you, by the way, if that's okay, we're going to have a quick. Yeah, I know. A quick kind of look back to. Actually, we got the first and last. As you know, by the way, our graphics suck in comparison to yours, but we're working on it and give us time. And Danny's done a nice new logo, so we're all cool.
We're not a big graphics pod anyway. We're not one of those. You know,
serious?
So.
Come on, those kind of the opening sequences with the little guys.
I don't make those. You know, shout out to Cole, who does all our gifs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we need to get that guy in our team.
He's great.
So you got your first and last team there. We'll go in weird reverse order. You free hit it in 38.
Yeah, I'll never do it again. Not because I got 40 points. I got 40 points because I decided to get no highly owned players. It was just like a laboratory experiment, basically, and it failed. But that's not why I won't do it again. I won't do it again for many reasons. One of which is my season did not matter. And I think probably 99% of people, Game Week 38 barely mattered to their season. Only if you're very, very high rank or very close to like a money league or mini league that you care about does Game Week 38 really matter for your FPL season. So there's that. It also just kind of ruins the whole like lead up to it. Because nowadays with leaks and all that stuff, I'm like, I have to have like 3 Discord tabs open and Twitter open just to make sure I get guys. And still, I picked Welbeck and Saka, who both didn't even start, even with all the leaks and whatnot. It's not a fun time. I think free hit is like the most fun chip earlier points in the season when there's maybe blanks or something like that, and you get to really just feel like, all right, I'll like get this, whatever Fulham guy that I don't want in my actual team just for this 1 week. But yeah, in Game Week 38, it just sucks. It just, there's no joy.
I mean, you were a captaincy switch away from it looking pretty good though, right? I mean, Semenyo came in. I mean, with Danny and I think we both had Evan Nilsson for that final game, and we were a bit gutted, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, I had Evan Nilsson too. I mean, you can see by the team that I went pretty hard on a few games. I went for a Newcastle clean. I went for Liverpool scoring tons of goals with Diaz, and it was my differential instead of going Mo. I went for Brighton attack, who scored 4 goals, and Welbeck wasn't in the squad, and Minta blanked. And I went for Bournemouth attack, who I got the Semenyo brace, but yeah, basically none of it worked.
Danny and I know we were both convinced that a Newcastle centre back was scoring and getting a big haul on that final.
No Tarko, no Branthwaite.
What the hell?
Their biggest game of their season was already done. The last game at Goodison. I just figured they were going to roll over, and I don't know. I think Newcastle kind of got maybe nervous. They looked really bad because I was watching that whole game and just thought it doesn't reflect in sort of like the XG and the shot numbers and stuff like that, but they had counterattacks nonstop through the game, and they just kept giving the ball away. It was just like misplaced passes, pass it out of bounds, bad touches that Everton would then gobble up, and it was just like, I don't know. I think they were really just nervous.
I'll be honest with you, just looking at your team there as well. You have been dealt a few harsh outcomes there, to be honest with you. I wouldn't be too down.
That's FPL, baby.
Very harsh.
I mean, because Isak obviously could have now. It was confirmed he was starting. That could have really banged for you. You had 2 Brighton attackers. Presumably, someone like Sharda came in as the sub.
Yeah, he subbed on for Welbeck.
Yeah. And Carlos Miguel. I mean, that's a great pick right there. You know.
Look, I mean, I ensure I get a Forest keeper.
It's important to pick tall players. So
yeah, I agree with
cool.
that.
He's very. To be honest, we don't really have a great deal of a plan for looking back on these game week 1 teams, but it's more just kind of fun to look back at where we started with. I mean, did you have any thoughts about that more hopeful time? I think you started out the season pretty well, right? From memory, it was
better than pretty well. I mean, best
anyway.
start I've had in a decade, probably. I think I was. Let me see. I was.
You were flying
270K in game week 7.
Yes. I have a note about that in front of me, actually. I'm actually
or something like that. No, better 190K in game week 8. Yeah, sorry, I'm ruining the quiz, but yeah, I had a bunch of sub 1 million game week ranks. In game week 7, my game week rank was 270K, which is insane, especially that early. And really, it was just Mo and Holland. I mean, if you guys remember the summer, the debate wasn't Mo or Holland. The debate was kind of Holland and Palmer or Saka. Like pretty much Mo was like a big differential at the beginning of the season, at least, with the, active community content creator types or whatever. And I was just hammering home, you guys are insane. Mo is so much better than Saka or Palmer all summer. And I got that part right. I mean, a lot of it, I think, is just pretty template, right? I mean, I think most people are on Isak. I think Poro was maybe the highest owned defender back then, which is funny in hindsight. Definitely Doku was my one punt, I would say. But Smith Rowe, I remember being between a few different sort of 5-5 mids, just like who do I like for the first 6 or 7 games, and he was actually great in the early part of the season, so that happened to go well for me. But Doku was just, I don't remember the exact situation of Man City, why I felt
they had it switched game week 2. I think it may have been a heavy play on that fixture. Yeah,
it was that, but there was also something else where I felt really, really confident he's going to start the first 3 games of the year.
Oscar Bob got injured, didn't he? And
Bob got hurt, and yeah, maybe someone else even was hurt. I wouldn't be surprised. And so it was just kind of like, well, Doku has to start, and so I just backed him for the 3 games. To be fair, he did start all 3 games. And he blanked in all of them. But I don't regret that. Looking back, I'm just like, I got the starts right, which was really the risk, right? Like that's the part that's risky. Not will Man City score goals. And they scored a shit ton of goals, but he just wasn't involved in them.
Yeah, it was. Sorry, Rich. It was just to comment on that. It was kind of amazing. It was just coming back to me a bit now, but it was kind of amazing when at the start of the season that. Because Haaland and Salah obviously worked amazingly well for anyone who got on both. But not only was it facilitated by the likes of Smith Rowe and stuff, but they also banged.
They banged.
I remember him just getting a good few 10, 11 pointers, just this the single goal winners early on. And I don't know, there were a few others of those cheap midfielders that people just kind of which were good picks, but were there to facilitate those two. And it all just went well. Which was at the start, which is great. It's nice that you got. Was that Nico Williams in there as well? That was a nice. That was a nice game week 1 pick. I can't remember what the fixtures were like, but that Forest was nice because I haven't seen Forest in many game week 1s.
They weren't
bad. That was actually a post-mortem note on our pod last night. Is that I so nailed that I think Forest are good for cleans and I like their defenders, but Nico actually got dropped right at the beginning of the season. He stopped starting in game week 4. And so what my dumbass did is fuck Forest, and I just went elsewhere. But whereas if I had just gone Aina or Murillo or Milenkovic, then I would have flown even more because they were good for another 15 games or something like that is when they were really on top. So, but yeah, I mean, game week 1 I did well. Like you said, game week 1 is the most anticipated part of the season. The most fun is all the preseason stuff. I feel like the additional time and space to think also really helps me. I always feel like I'm kind of playing catch up in the middle of the season where it's like, oh, I didn't have time to look at this. I'll just get whatever and just do my transfers sort of in haste or whatever. But, pre-game week 1, I'm tinkering all the time. I'm very strongly on 1 or 2, convinced on 1 or 2 picks and playing around the edges on the different 5-5 mids or the different 6-0 punts or whatever, and by the time it's game week 1, I usually feel really good with my team, and Yeah, falls apart from there.
I've just got two things that I'm going to say before I move on to our next manager. The one thing, you've got two players in your first game week squad there who are in our. We got a segment later on for the worst FPL picks this season. We've got a
Ooh.
squad of who I've put together as the worst picks, nominated at least partly by our audience, but I put that together as. I'll let you guess who that might be for later on. But the other thing Danny's just reminded me of is how many people just narrowly escaped that kind of Oscar Bob trap. You know, I know.
True, I forgot about that.
We both share this kind of annoyance for when people get saved from usually a City midfielder
or Saka earlier. This, when he came back from the injury, that put me over the edge when he subbed on and scored. And I was just like, oh, give me a break.
It's so annoying, isn't it? When you feel like you've got one over everyone, and then they.
Well, that was the same week that everyone had. Well, not everyone, but that was the same week where loads of people had Foden as well. And
my god,
he did. They all started Saka and Foden didn't come on at all.
Yeah.
So Murphy came off the bench, who'd already got an assist, and whatever it was, 6 point at least.
I'll tell you who's definitely in the shit team of the year is aforementioned Phil Foden.
Oh, come on, don't ruin it.
I mean, everyone knows that, right?
He's up there for the nominee for the Star Prize. We're going to nominate our number one worst pick of the game.
He's in it every season, other than last season. I have to say.
True, yeah. That's
didn't Walsh has already nominated him to be in his game week 1 squad.
Well, yeah. Part of the nomination is he's thinking he's going to get a huge price decrease, which remains to be seen, right? So let's see. In 2022 season, he started at 8. In 23-24 season, he started at 7.5. That's when he had the 230 point season. Then they raised him $2 million to 9.5 this season. And so now the big thing is, where are they going to go? Are they going to go 8? Are they going to 7.5? Or are they just going to keep him at 9 and just be like, well, that's who he is now?
Yeah. I suppose maybe they will, but my automatic thought is that it will be a massive drop. It depends. I don't know. I guess every time we talk about this sort of stuff now, we've also got to think that Southerns is in charge, and maybe that changes everything. I don't know what that's.
Is he?
Yeah, he's basically in charge now, isn't he? I don't know. He's just going to make all the game-based decisions, which is crazy. I don't really know what to think about this yet. Maybe it's something we should talk about later. Obviously, I like that.
I always thought that was a joke. I didn't realize it was real.
Oh no.
But yeah, I mean, first of all, I think if Foden drops to 6.5 or 7, unless we see something that proves otherwise, which we may well do, I still think he's a crap pick. I'll just put that out there now.
Yeah, fair.
Game week 1, but
and bad hair. So
yeah.
I mean,
sorry, do you remember Rashford dropped to 6.5? Was it?
That's when he was incredible, right?
Yeah, he had a season where he did an amazing season. Or he did a good season. He did a really good season. Then he had a really shit season, and then
that's his whole career, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And he dropped to 6.5, and then got 17 goals and 11 assists or something stupid.
Yeah, 205 points in that season. He was 6.5, and then he went to 9.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Just before we move on, because it's a question for you, Alon. Which week did you wildcard in? I think.
Oh my god, I'm getting all the jabs and all my weak points. I wildcarded in 6 when a lot of other people wildcarded, and I got rid of Mo and fucked everything. Pardon my language.
No, that's what this is here.
Everyone's posting their graphs. I don't even know what website that's from. The little rank.
Yeah.
Oh, optimized. So at least in our Discord, everyone's graph is the same. It's you're starting around here, then there's this huge, ridiculous dip, no Mo, and then there's a huge increase of rank and back to normalcy and beyond when they just said, all right, I'll just get Mo back. This is ridiculous.
Do you know what? I did actually initially put them in our slide deck, but then I saw Danny's and thought, no, I'm going to leave it out. And if you want to see yours, I'm happy to send it. You know what? Ours actually looked pretty similar, but then I looked at the amount of points on the left-hand axis.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. You wouldn't even be able to see Danny's on mine. It's just it goes so low, and Danny's this little dot up here.
Actually, you're next, Danny. For some reason, I thought it was the other way around. But how did things finish up for you?
That's a very cordial picture this time.
He's very gentlemanly.
Okay, nice. Yeah,
Get him, Danny.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I was just looking at. I don't think I'll only talk very briefly about Game Week 38 because I don't think anyone really wants to talk about Game Week 38. I don't know. Everyone's put it to bed. Come back to that. I mean, it looked good on paper. I was happy with it. Evan Nilsson should have scored. Cunha actually started and played 90 minutes, and as a Palace were what I expected and all that sort of stuff, and it ended up okay. Salah did well, blah blah blah. So I think another red arrow to finish the season. There's just I'll talk about that probably more in relation to some of the players who'd be in the trolls of the season or whatever it is. But it is interesting looking back at Game Week 1, and I'll reflect on this more. And I haven't really thought about it much with mine, but I do remember at the start of the season. We'll talk about this later. But I didn't feel happy going into Game Week 1, which is probably the first time that's ever happened to me. It's normally perfect for me on paper because I like to have a long time to process everything each week in FPL. Just the way I am, I like to just go to things, let them simmer, think about ideas, really, think about it a lot, but in a sort of specific way that just means the more time, the better. And it's all about sort of getting rid of biases and overcoming emotions and cognitive biases and all that for me. And I usually, by the time I get to Game Week 1, feel really happy, and I'm like, I've done about my strategy and the players and so. For whatever reason, this season I didn't. I don't know why. Actually, do you know what it was? I am reason now because last season was a deeply unenjoyable one for me because I played pretty well on paper and I didn't get a good rank in the end, and no, not by I was going to say by my standards then, but not what I would be happy with. Even though I was spent the whole season at about 20k, I played pretty solidly and just nothing was coming off. And then the last game week of the season, it was had this a choice between João Pedro and Mateta, and I kept João Pedro. And Mateta gets a hat trick, so it was just a shit end to the season. It was just crap. So because it was so unenjoyable last season, I really shut off and wasn't looking forward to the new season in a way that I hadn't really before. And it was fine. I needed the shut off, but I shut off so much that it was quite hard for me to get back into it, which has never happened before. And I didn't really get the feel at any point. And then I'm actually going to, thinking about that now, that is a learning for me because I can't let that happen again to that extent because it's so important Game Week 1. And I just never felt happy. A few players I was happy with, I guess. But it's not really like me as a Game Week 1 team. Players like Muniz I wasn't happy with. I will talk about Muniz because I think that is another learning. I think in terms of groupthink and FOMO and stuff. I want to come back to that because that was a really good example for me.
I'm surprised to see Jota. He's so not a Danny player.
Not at all. Exactly. And it was one of them where I was kind of making, I was kind of making sacrifices for others and ultimately decided quite early on that I didn't think it worked well enough with Salah and Haaland, which was a mistake. I didn't want to rely on the cheap guys, and it was a mistake. But that was just where my sort of frame of mind was. And we did for whatever. I do remember that we were very confident Jota was going to start, which he did, because I think lots of players were injured at Liverpool at the time. So at least I did know that he was, and I knew he was a pretty good pick, and at least he did score in the first week. I'm just looking at the others. Obviously, I had Rashford, which again looks terrible on paper, but as a United fan at the time, I was very confident he was going to start, which he did. He played, he was. I know United have been terrible, but at the time we were feeling quite positive about Amorim. He was 7 million, I think, or something like that. He was really cheap. Bruno was very high up for a lot of people. He was high on models, and a lot of people started with him. And I was like, it's not that much different if you really, because I think Rashford's definitely going to start. So you never know what's going to happen with Rashford. So he was a bit of a wild card, sort of thrown in there to sort of, I don't mind having a bit of fun with someone. And he did start. He started at least, yeah.
It was Ten Hag. Also, it wasn't even Amorim.
Sorry, Ten Hag.
Yeah. Fresh off the Europa win.
Yeah, I've been still thinking about Amorim. Yeah, of course, Ten Hag. But there was some optimism exactly off from the win. Yeah. So anyway, but yeah, it just never felt great. And actually looking at it there, it doesn't even. It's not even as flexible as I normally have. I'm normally one for price points and the flexibility in that sense, and I actually think that in many ways, and it's a Salah and Haaland team might have been more typical for me, and it was such a stretch though with Haaland being 15 million, but that was actually a more flexible team for me because you've got the most expensive player in midfield and you've got the most expensive player up front.
Yep.
Whereas this is a bit of a spread, and I've got this 7 million here, 7 million there, 8 million, whatever Jota was. and it just never felt comfortable. And yeah, ultimately, I didn't start the season well. And normally I start the season well, which is weird. And I want to talk about that as well, actually, later on. But yeah, it's interesting looking at it. It's not a nice game week 1 team.
That was definitely an angle that I was proud of. I took with the Salah and Haaland and Trent. So my thinking at the time was I have the most expensive player in all 3 position groups. So even though it seems like, I'm scraping the barrel and I'm spending so much money on these 3 assets and blah, 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 I can get anyone very easily. So if it's a bet, even if first 2 game weeks, neither of them score and Trent doesn't keep it clean, whatever, it's just boom. I have everyone, 2 transfers. Everyone else, and this was I was arguing this all summer. If anyone else wants to go Saka to Mo, game week 1 teams, with the low budget, it's like, how are you getting there? You have to do Saka and your 6 million forward and your 5-5 mid triple move to 2 non-playing players to get Mo. It's impossible.
Yeah, and you're reminding me now of how the season went. But when I kind of reset in my mind and my approach to the game, I was much calmer by the time I wildcard in game week 6 as well. I'm pretty sure it was 6. And part of that reset and just getting back to my kind of style and my lone wolf approach and just doing what I think, and I had a bit more clarity basically. And part of that was why I had Palmer that week, and I had Palmer. That was part of the reason as well. Was Palmer and Saka. I had faith in Palmer, but I had Palmer. I think Palmer, Saka, and Haaland or something like that.
Yeah.
At the time, I think everyone was on Haaland because he was absolutely on fire or whatever. But for me, I think I was on above average. Actually, I was on above average that week.
Oh, funny.
Yeah.
I kind of want to listen back. That'll be a good learning.
Yeah, because I actually had that debate with Baker, and he was saying that for him it wasn't flexible enough, and I said, but for me this is more flexible than what you guys are doing, because that's right. because of the price points. If Palmer, for example, goes off, how are you going to get there? And of course, what happened subsequently was, obviously, first of all, he scored 4 goals in the first game that I got him in, which was the best moment of my season.
Pretty good.
Yeah, and but of course, then everyone immediately wanted to get on him, and everyone. I mean, I don't know how it worked out, and I don't, probably ups and downs, but I remember virtually everyone had to sell Trent to get Palmer then, because they didn't have there was no other route to him. And I remember there was a good period there, which is a period where I did a lot of climbing, where people were tearing the teams apart to get on the right midfielders. And yeah, from game week 6, sitting on, I mean, I still had to switch to Salah a few weeks later, but sitting on those midfielders just felt so comfortable because the price points, Saka and Palmer, they were just there. So
yeah. It is funny in hindsight. I mean, like you said, Haaland was on such insane fire to start the season, and there's no way anyone would have known this, so it's not even feasible. But the right team was actually Mo, Saka, and Palmer, and no Haaland, because that was the beginning of the end for Haaland. Was right then in game week 6 when we all wildcarded, and Saka's who I got rid of to get Palmer, but Saka was great. He still had a 13-pointer, an 18-pointer soon after that before he got injured. And Mo obviously stayed hot, for another 20 game weeks or something. But yeah, there was no way of knowing that. But if anyone had done that, I think they would have won the entire thing. They would have won FPL.
That's what I switched to, though, a few weeks later, because that was the other thing. Because I had Haaland, Saka, and Palmer. Obviously, Haaland easily facilitates Salah with his price.
Yes, yeah.
So I've not looked back exactly what my team looked like, but I definitely, when I made that switch, I think in game week 10, I then had Palmer, Saka, Salah, with forwards like Cunha or whatever and Wood. So that was when it suddenly, that again, it's amazing, isn't it? A few little tiny moves, a few little things that you feel are right, where the pieces are right, changes so much. Because for a good period there, I just felt so comfortable because I didn't have to panic. I didn't have to worry. I didn't have to sell Trent. I didn't have to do this or that. Yeah. I know. Obviously, I got lucky with the swings for Haaland versus Salah wasn't fair. Just put that aside for 1 second. But in terms of how I felt about the team,
yeah,
and you're able to build up transfers then all of a sudden, and really, I hadn't thought about it until now, but that all stemmed essentially from that wild card, and it wasn't necessarily that good all round, because it didn't have Salah in it still, but the pieces were all right with Saka and Palmer. And because Saka and Palmer were there, it allowed me to do exactly what you said there and change the team in exactly the way I wanted to.
Yep.
So yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? The butterfly effect of these little things early on.
And I had a very similar Game Week 6 wildcard team with No Mo and all these guys. And I was just like, fuck it, I'm not getting Mo. You know, that I want to, like, we should go to your team, Richie, too. But at some point, I want to go back and try and remember what you were thinking when you got rid of Holland in Game Week 10.
Yeah,
because we talked about that last night, because I looked at your team, and I think Late Risers and Zofars and, you know, a friend of ours, Jason, and everyone, like literally 0 out of however many I looked at, had Mo in their Game Week 6 wildcard team, which is obviously crazy in hindsight, but that's just what was going on. And then like most people except me in Game Week 10 did some sort of Holland to Mo or hit out Saka to Mo. And these are players who don't even normally take hits, a Baker and stuff too in there. And I just couldn't remember why, because you look back at Holland's stats, it's like, yeah, he blanked a few in a row, but at that point he was still getting like 8 shots a game. And in that Southampton game the week before in Game Week 9, I think he had like 2.3 XG on his own. And I was just like, I don't know what I could have done there. Like, I still look back and I'm like, holding Holland still wasn't bad, right? Like, at that point, he could have hat-tricked in any of those games. And then they, you know, lost 4 in a row.
To make you feel worse, Alan, even I did that move.
Even Richie did that
Even
move.
I did that move. Do you know, to be honest with you, one of the main reasons, and I think people will struggle to remember the back this far, but if you're anyone who likes to look forward a little bit and see where it's going to take you, it was impossible to move with that kind of structure. It was so difficult. And because the mid-price strikers actually were coming into a really nice period, it was very opportune. But I remember looking back on it, because if you did it in Game Week 10, it was probably the bravest time, but it was the best time. Whereas you could have left it for another 2 or maybe 4 weeks from memory or something like that, but then you probably would have missed all of these kind of mid-price striker angles and obviously Mo's best fixtures and that sort of thing. So you kind of had, it was a sort of a leap of faith that if it went wrong and the other way, it could have jarred your season completely. And so the outcome was incredibly harsh.
Yeah, I mean, it was
There's no doubt about it.
In terms of, like, I do remember, you know, a lot of my thought process at the time, and it's kind of amazing, isn't it? I mean, I hope that we never really have something as significant as this again, because it's so unfair. You know, a whole season is such a long time for people to have to suffer if you don't make this one call. It could have gone another way. It's just so unfair, and I hate that. That also relates to the point I want to talk about later on when we're listening to your pod before about the idea of like Game Week 1 bench boost and then Game Week 2 or 3 wildcard.
Yeah,
Walsh. But you know, at the time, I remember very clearly being very objective about it and knowing that it was basically sort of 50-50 in terms of how those 2 players could how it could pan out in terms of those 2 players, that they were both brilliant players. It was scary. I mean, selling Haaland was such a scary thing to do, and it's selling someone is even more scary just in general, because it's the loss aversion and what you've already got and all that sort of stuff. But I do remember the 3 fundamentals for me in what was a very I had to be really objective, because I remember some people were sort of passionately saying such and such is better and such is better. And I remember just blocking it all out and going, no, that factually, that's all bollocks. Like, what you're saying there is just narrative, and I don't see anything where I can back a narrative here, and it's too significant. But what I did see was what Rich touched on, was very clearly early on we could see that the strikers, particularly with the bonus point system, were getting 9-pointers, just knocking 9-pointers out of the park. So strikers had just changed, right? So fundamentally they'd changed because they were getting more points for bonus, and it was quite clear. And at the time, I can't remember exactly all of who, but I remember Cunha looked good, and I remember Wood obviously was brilliant. Plus, you likes of Isak, whoever else was at the time. I'm trying to look now. Raul, I don't know. There were lots of good strikers. Wissa probably, and Raul definitely, I think, was looking better at that point. And these guys, you know, the guys I just mentioned, Wood, Cunha, Isak, Raul, are all on penalties as well. They were all getting 90 minutes. It felt like a really solid position with 9-pointers coming out for fun. And I just thought, that was one of the things. I was like, right, okay, I'm looking at this now. I see it as basically a 50-50. However, in terms of the players, However, we've got this forward position that I would really like to play around with, which helps me compensate to some extent if it does go wrong, because I've not got Haaland there. I feel good about these strikers. The small added thing that Salah is a midfielder, so he does need to do slightly less. I was sort of saying to myself, you know, I've always been a massive one for midfielders over strikers. I very rarely captain strikers and stuff anyway. And he was 2.5 million less. And in such a tight decision for me at the time, it was literally just because it was a bit of a sliding doors moment, and because everyone had wildcarded in six, lots of us had lots of transfers as well, didn't we? So for the first time, I mean, if it had been a normal season, there's every chance, I don't know how there's every chance lots of us wouldn't have even had 2 transfers, because it required 2 transfers to make the switch. Lots of us had 2 or 3 or 4, and so there was this sliding doors moment and an opportunity to basically make a bet. And I've just looked now, and that week Salah had Brighton at home, which at the time looked like a good fixture. I can't remember who Haaland had. He had Bournemouth away, which I guess looked a bit harder. So like I say, though, I'm only explaining my process at the time, which was I was terrified. It did feel 50-50. It did feel like it could go either way with those players. So I decided to just go with those very small kind of objective stuff, which was the strikers, the price, and the midfielder, and make a bet. And it was weird, because pressing the buttons, you thought you could actually feel the buttons saying, this is now a bad season or a good season.
Yeah.
I think it's also worth just remembering the context of game week 9. Obviously, there was that 2.3 XGI game from Haaland, lots of triple captains and that sort of thing, right? And there were, I think it's fair to say that had, let's say, a couple of those goals gone in, because there was some really clear-cut chances in that game. I remember watching it pretty well. You know, people's mindset would have been very different. But I would possibly, logically, Danny might have gone ahead with it and so on. But I think a lot of people who were on the cusp probably wouldn't have done that. So yeah, it does make a huge difference.
Yeah,
we'll just go on to. Oh, sorry, Danny.
No, I was just going to say one last thing on this. I mean, I can't believe we're already 45 minutes in. I don't know what's happening. But the other thing that's funny with Haaland in retrospect, I mean, is, you know, obviously, you know, essentially 100% owned in game week 1, right? And you were kind of insane if you didn't go there. A big part of that was home Ipswich game week 2. Like, if that was, you know, away Liverpool, he would have been more like 60% owned, not 100% owned. And where that would have ended up, if things went, you know, relatively the same other than that 1 week, is he still hat-tricked against West Ham, braces against Brentford, scores, stay humble versus Arsenal. Everyone would have been ripping their teams up to get Haaland. It would have been like the opposite. It would have been like, oh my God, get Salah out of here, Palmer, Saka, none of them matter except Haaland, who I'm going to captain for the next 20 game weeks. Because I think I remember that being like my sort of state was Liverpool have all these insane Champions League games. Their fixtures are getting really harder. I'm captaining Haaland for the next 15 game weeks. That I remember like saying stuff like that, and you know, obviously it didn't work out.
To finish off this a little bit, I'll just talk through my situation. Now, it's I'm going to start with, I always have this situation. I'm going to do one of my asides here, Alon, so nothing about FPL really, as usual.
Love that.
Because that's what I'm here for. And game week 38, right, so it's almost always the same weekend as my wedding anniversary, right? So we're almost always like away or doing something, visiting family or whatever it might be, because it's a bank holiday weekend in the UK as well, usually that weekend as well. So I've made transfers sort of 2:30 UK time from the most bizarre public toilets all over the UK. You know, usually I've made for anyone who watches this who lives in London, I've made them from the Barbican toilets, which is like an arts and culture complex.
Yeah, I've been there actually.
Pretty cool buildings there. All sorts of other places. This time. So I went to a town in Suffolk, in East Anglia, called Southwold. Now, Southwold is where Tory MPs have their kind of second homes. It's quite well-to-do. Local people have been edged out, a bit like Cornwall. It's sort of a touristy town of sorts now, but it's quite nice. Anyway, it's one of the only places you can imagine in the modern world. I couldn't get any phone signal. I couldn't get any reception for Wi-Fi. So we got there at sort of midday, and I was like, shit. I was like, what am I going to do? So I just decided to front up. I just told my wife, I was like, I am going to be a nightmare in the kind of hour before this happens, and I'm sorry. Like, so please, like, we were with her parents as well, right? So like, enjoy the afternoon, take off or whatever. And so anyway, so what I did, I was looking around trying to find free Wi-Fi in like the 30 to 60 minutes before deadline, trying to get like tips from Danny or Mikey and all the other kind of guys I talked to about what was going on if I could. Anyway, so the only Wi-Fi you could get, right, was the East Suffolk. So this is the county in the UK where it is, the East Suffolk Wi-Fi service, yeah, which was at their local library. I kind of tried to log in, and I realized, oh no, I can't log in because I'm not a local. So you needed a postcode. So apparently, I now live in a town in Suffolk called Raiden. So if anyone needs me, I'm there. So I punched it in from this poster on a window. Got that in. Got in with about kind of half an hour to spare, and then I was just waiting, like updating and trying to get things in, and that led me to sell Cunha for Evan Nelson for the same amount of points.
Hell
So,
yeah.
complete waste of time. But obviously I'd sweated through a shirt or whatever it was. But this happens every game week 38 for me. I am always like on tenterhooks. I can't, you know, it's because it's such an awkward time. I know, like, I can't speak to you on this because obviously all deadlines are an awkward time for you. But yeah, my God, it was just another one. Anyway, it ended that way. By the way, everyone who's watching this pod doesn't know my rank as well, because the whole season I've not.
I know it.
I didn't look. You've had a look now, so I may as well reveal it. It's a kind of like, it's the most beige, bland rank known to, you know, like the most boring one possible. Because
better than that.
No. Do you know what about? I'm one of those managers who people here probably think I'm the other guy. I'm not Danny, right? So Danny's the clever one. He gets all the right, you know, whatever it is. But despite what people think, right, I'm still technically an elite 1K wanker. You know, not holding on by my fingernails, admittedly, because I've been around for ages, right? So I'm still on some of those algorithms or metrics because I've simply been around for long enough. But yeah, it was a 76k finish in the end, which was, I had a very similar season to Andy. Let's talk FPL actually. I look, you know, he's had a very, very interesting similar run. But in the sort of 20 years or so that I've been playing this, I think that's probably my sixth or seventh worst finish. So it's fine, but obviously it's one of those ones where, again, across the season, you said it on this pod previously, Alon, there's only 38 rolls of the dice, 38 poker hands. If I probably got about 5 wrong, one particularly badly because I took a -8.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I actually got that Haaland swing on my side as well, so I can't complain too much. But it's a fine season, but not one that I'll remember particularly. It's one of those ones. So you know, what can you do? And to look back, there's a couple of my trolls in that game week 1 team who were going to be in the team of the season, the bad team of the season. There, you can probably, and Kunku, Danny would never have let me get away with that one, right? So if we were doing the pod from the start of last season, he would have spared me in Kunku. I don't know about Solanke. Could have gone either way, that one. But,
yeah.
Yeah, he got injured game week 1.
He got injured. That's it. Yeah.
I didn't think Nkunku was a terrible pick in game week 1. I thought it could have been good, and I remember being worried because again, that FOMO, because everyone had him, and I remember
everyone had him. Yeah,
pretty worried because obviously I thought he could easily do well. I thought Kwanzaa was a terrible pick, which a lot of people were on, but Nkunku wasn't so bad.
Yes, no, I dodged that one.
You did well to get on. Obviously, you're a bit unfortunate maybe because Porro actually scored that week, but you did well because one thing I didn't have was Arsenal defense game week 1, which I remember really as well was just like, it just wasn't me because I knew I had so much faith in their defense. The defense already looked ridiculous from the year before, and I know they had tough fixtures to begin with, but remember they started off with like 3 or 4 clean sheets in the first 4 weeks. You know, David Raya,
Raya was going crazy.
Yeah, he should definitely be in the bloody troll of the season. Can't stand those sort of goalkeepers.
Do you know what? he comes up in a very interesting way in a few minutes' time. So hold that thought.
Can't wait.
We're gonna do it in a minute before we do our sort of deep reflections and questions for the season, which is probably going to be the most interesting part of the pod. Let's be honest, because you don't want to know about us. It's a bit sort of self-involved. But I've got a couple of managers I'd just like to talk about, and then including ourselves, I'm going to do a really quick fire little quiz on our seasons, which our managers here don't know anything about, so it should be quite interesting. But quick mention to a few people. I looked this up the other day. I thought it was a really interesting story. So Marku, a very reputed Finnish manager, his rank history on the left there, obviously astoundingly good. So, you know, as you can see, 2,000, 5,000, 8,000, 24, 710, 123, highest rank there in 2021, 22. So incredible stuff. So he finished, I thought this was really interesting, but it's worth looking on his Twitter and Blue Sky. I think it's possibly both anyway, the kind of story of his season, because I think that's really interesting. But he finished just shy of 900k actually, so 873k, and I think it's a really interesting story. But also the other thing is that he appears to be very sanguine about it. It's fine. He followed his process through, etc. I think it's quite different probably to any of the managers in here. You know, but he has his methods and broadly done him very, very well. But it's a really interesting one, so please do look that up. And I'm sure Marco will be back to kind of smash the rest of us next season anyway. The other manager, I have to say this, by the way, I'm going to reveal my stat for our good friend Fpl Mikey, who's in our SKLW team, and he's one of my kind of close friends and confidants here. He finished in the top 600.
Woo!
He's won money for the second year in a row. So last season he won 10 grand, I think 5 grand, 10 grand. Michael will tell us, I'm sure, in the chat. But yeah, he won some more money from Planet FPL, I think, something like that as well. Anyway, would anyone like to guess? And this is as a percentage figure. So if you imagine 100% is the highest possible you can get against the top 1,000 managers or the Elite 1K, what his relative variance is.
Ooh, I need you to define some terms here. I don't know what that means.
Which means to say all the decisions he made, like against the field, these ones went better than the rest of the top the top Elite 1,000 managers.
I don't even know where to begin.
No, it's quite tricky, to be fair. But
yeah, this is a percentage that we're guessing.
Yeah, it is. I'll let Danny have a shout.
Yeah, Danny, you go.
I have no idea. It's something as bad as you can get if it's a percentage. So
his relative variance, and this is for people who are interested in this kind of stuff. I know not everyone is. 99.6%.
Wow,
it's bound to be
against the Elite 1K.
Yeah.
99.6.
But in my head, I was just thinking most of those people make the same moves and have most of the same players anyway. So like, how much room for variance even is there? But I guess there's still a lot. That's crazy.
That proper height. And what's interesting, by the way, is he wasn't carrying kind of necessarily a lot of differential. So there's also a percentage for differential expected value and that kind of stuff. Again, I know this is a bit boring for some people, so I'll just be quick. But his score for that was kind of 52.5%, which means that he was making broadly similar. So he had broadly similar makeup of his teams, but the players that he did have that were different. Consa was a good example, I think. Really smashed it. So anyway, well done, Mike. Everyone should at some point have one of those seasons.
One day.
So there you go. Oh, I've got a quick question for me, actually. How do you avoid looking at your rank? Rich, impossible to avoid on laptop. Yeah, it's a good question. I have one of those brains where I can kind of ignore something. So you know if people buy you a Christmas present and leave it in another room or whatever, I will walk past it for like 6 months and it won't bother me whatsoever. So Matt, if that's my
powerful
tip,
he's powerful.
Have one of those kind of brains. I can't kind of explain it, but there you go. Okay, so yeah, quick look at Sirens, Danny, first of the evening.
Hey.
Excellent. So Alan, it's traditional here for me to come.
Oh, I know. It happened last time.
At some point. So some of these, by the way, are kind of funny. Others are have already been talked through. So I'll just sort of pick a few out in front of me. Let's start with player gain. Now, this is players in your season that have gained more for you against the field than any other player.
Mm.
So, Danny, would you like to have a guess? I've done a top 3 for all of us. Who do you think got the best gain for you against the field over your season?
Oh Jesus!
It has to be someone you've had for multiple games, right? Because it's it's a total. Yeah, okay.
Usually someone who you've maybe captained a few times or just had for a long time, and other people didn't have them, that sort of thing.
Ooh, maybe Bruno Fernandes might be up there.
Bruno Fernandes is number 1.
Hey!
Wow,
Very
look at
good.
you.
Matt Bugsby has put a guess in the chat, but do you want to put forward any other names for 2 and 3?
Oh God, I've got such recency going on in my head. I feel like the start of the season was so long ago. I can't remember at all. I guess I can remember. I guess Eze did well for me, and Cunha, and I don't know, maybe even Trent. I don't know, because
what about Palmer for you?
Oh yeah, maybe he might be up there just for that 25 points because literally nobody owned him that week. So.
Right,
Palmer is number 2.
Let's go.
So we're doing well here. I can say a third is a pod favorite. But do you know what? I'll come back to that because actually he comes up somewhere else in just a second. So we'll come back for your number 3 in just a minute. Alon, do you want to guess yours? Your number 1 is a really weird one.
It's probably Pickford.
It is.
Yeah, I knew that because on last night's pod, I was like, the one area where I was way better than everyone, including you, Danny, was keeper. I just got like 40 more keeper points than anyone because I had Pickford on my game week 6 wildcard and I just held him forever. And he had 2 penalty saves, tons of cleans, tons of saves. Like just
incredible.
Killed it there.
Any other guesses?
That's hard. Haaland maybe because I just held him so damn long.
Haaland number 2.
There we go. That's a bad thing, by the way. Don't do that at home, kids. That's a bad hold.
Your number 3 is a personal favorite of he appeared in our team of the season as well, Danny. But you had Milenkovic number 3.
Oh, let's go. Love that.
I'm going to let you guess my top 3. Danny, you're probably better at sort of knowing who it's likely to be. But can I just say, number 2 is genuinely embarrassing, and I don't understand how this is even possible.
Whoa.
But number 1 is quite exciting.
Oh God.
I have a guess.
Go on.
I think Munoz might be in yours.
Number 3.
I did have him because I saw him in your game week 1 team. Yeah, I was thinking that was a differential.
I got him pretty early on both occasions. Yeah.
Is Eze up there then? No, is he not? Is that too recent? Oh God.
Chris Wood.
Number 1. Chris Wood.
Go. I know you guys love him.
Yeah, who doesn't love Chris Wood, right?
Well, I just remembered because I was thinking about Chris Wood anyway for my team, and I just remembered then that you also had him for that hat trick that I didn't, which was one of the most horrible parts of one of the most horrible days for my season.
I transferred him out that week.
Same.
Brutal.
Number 2, genuinely, like I say, I'm embarrassed. I don't really want to share it here. I don't sharing my rank, which I was a little disappointed with. I can live with that, but this is genuinely because he's in my team of the rubbish. He's like the rubbish team of the season.
Who is it?
Jesus, I called it.
No idea. Go on.
David Raya.
Oh.
I don't understand how it's even possible. Maybe I got it wrong. Maybe I've written it down wrong.
Was he in your game week 1 team?
Unless it was like bad team of the season or something. I don't think so.
No, you must have just had him forever. I don't know.
Yeah. That seems really odd.
It's giving me the ick a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't think you. I mean, Alon, you might be replacing me here next season. We should do some other ones. I'll just do these really quickly. I'm going to skip a few because I don't want to kind of.
Yeah. Let's get some good bits.
Now, Alon, I didn't do this for you, so it's just for me and Danny. But like in terms of a single game week score for a player, best gain and worst loss was the same for both of us, Danny.
Oh, best game must be Palmer. No,
I thought it would be, but it's another.
Bruno. No, Bruno.
Bruno game week 29.
Bruno, when you captained him, right?
Yeah.
That was the last week I was on. You
I hit
guys
him
were fresh off
Django.
that. Oh wow!
Right.
Which is quite good. Worst loss in a single game week against the field.
didn't you guys own who went crazy?
You hate him, Danny. He's a minutes problem.
Oh right.
Is it just some Saka Hall or Foden Hall or something? Or De Bruyne, maybe?
No, think someone who always
Not-
goes off on like 60 minutes.
Yeah, I was going to say Mateta, but I don't hate him. No, not Mateta. It can't be Mateta because I don't hate him, but he's definitely that sort of player.
I'm surprised the chat.
Oh,
hasn't
Murphy.
done it.
Murphy.
Murphy is Jamie 32.
Oh, because that was
Screwed us.
the double, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the
Okay,
double, and everyone owned him, and yeah, he flew.
Couple more questions. I'll just pick the more interesting ones. Who do you think took the most hits?
Me, probably.
You took 4.
Well, I know I only took 1, so it depends how many you took, Rich. I guess. Well, you definitely did at least 1 -8, so it might even be Rich. You know.
Okay, it might be Richie. Yeah.
7.
Whoa.
Wow.
That's embarrassing. I mean, so we can look there at a learning for next season. Christ, I mean, 7 is pretty high. For
I mean, I
someone
only
like that.
took a few, right? And I doubled my worst ever rank. So, there's nothing to learn there, clearly.
No.
Should have taken more hits.
Yeah, well, yours worked out pretty well from the looks of it in comparison, anyway. But this is a fun one. I quite like this. I should save it till last, but it's in my head now. Right, what do you think your latest transfer were? Like, how close did you get to deadline with your latest transfer?
I mean, mine would definitely have been close with all these bloody leaks this season and stuff, and wait until last minute. But I because of all the crashes, I tend to not go beyond 5 minutes.
I was going to guess around 5 minutes, too.
Very good, Alon, because Danny, 4 minutes and 58 seconds
Wow.
was your transfer.
There you go. See, consistent.
Alon was 1 minute and 36.
Whoa! I kept it really close.
Your alarm didn't go off that day.
Yeah, holy shit.
Okay, now I did tell you earlier that I was kind of the James Bond figure.
Yeah, what are we doing here? 007?
14 seconds.
14 seconds.
I know. What the hell? I don't know what happened there or when that was. I reckon it might have been a wild card, like last week or something like that. I don't know.
Right.
A complete guess, but 14 seconds.
Jeez.
Okay, last couple. Captain success. So this is basically 7 points and over for your nominated captain. Obviously, highest is 100%, worst is 0%. What do you reckon you got, Alon?
Oh, it's going to be really bad. I mean, captaincy is one area. I mean, everything that's bad in my season is tied to Mo. And captaincy is one area that I was really bad. And that's because everyone was capping Mo and I was just capping like Holland and Palmer blanks. I don't know what's really bad. I don't know, 50% or something.
52.3%.
That is incredibly bad. Holy shit. I mean, I know because I looked yesterday that my vice captain outscored my captain, which is for sure the first time that's ever happened in my life.
That is interesting.
That
Danny?
is brutal.
I don't know. I guess mine, I've no idea, but I guess it must be, I'll go for 72%.
That would be
God,
really
you're good, aren't you? 71.4.
Wow.
Jesus.
You're locked in.
You know, all I was doing there was just like pretty much, when you see those, it's like on the tools or whatever, where you've got the green and the red. And I've not actually looked at mine, but
Yeah.
I was thinking it can't be more than 30% reds.
Yeah.
Generally, anyway. But.
Anyone want to guess for mine?
I mean, I would guess similar. I know your rank is not as good as Danny's, but I think your team is usually similar, and so I would say around the same 70 to 75 range.
Yeah, I would as well.
73.8.
Look at us.
So
we're crazy.
Which is pretty good, right? So I don't need to worry about
really
that
good.
anyway. That's yes, Pep. Thank you very much for that comment. More of that, please. Which is not many people say that, Maverick. I'll just read out the rest, right? Because I don't want to bore everyone. But the other bits that were quite interesting, I looked at both of your variants against the Elite 1000. Really interesting. So remember, Mikey got 99%. Danny, 92.9%.
Wow.
Me, 56.3. Alon,
30.
I'm sorry, by the way, Alan. 2.7.
2.7. What is that? Whoa, that's crazy. I think maybe 25.
Maybe you got really unlucky. This is your way out. You know,
I mean,
all of
is
their
it?
picks worked.
I don't know if you know like how it's calculated. I'm just curious if it means like every week that I had Holland and didn't have Mo, is that like a point against me? You know what I mean? Like, is it?
It's a big blow, probably, because
compounding for
yeah,
20 straight weeks.
Yeah, I mean that would be a big blow because models had Haaland and Salah, pretty much similar for most of the season. So that every time that happened would have been a big blow.
Which is a ton because I captained Haaland probably more than anyone in that exact time period. So it's doubling down on it. I never used the solvers, but I imagine if I ever put my team in a solver, it would just say do Haaland and player for Mo like immediately. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know.
Really?
There's a lot of people who heavily used, models who did the same, who just stuck on Haaland because, like I said,
really?
the EV, the predicted kind of points were.
Yeah, it was probably close every week.
That was it. It wasn't really changing much. Even when we really saw City just not looking the same team, really, and you saw that as well. But I think you just didn't want to, you just made your bed there, hadn't you? And just decided,
yeah.
but with the whole Rodri thing, it didn't. There was a
Solvers
sharp decline.
talent. Yeah,
there was a much sharper decline in real life than there was on models because obviously it uses longer term data.
What's funny is in hindsight, I mean, I don't use models. That should be our edge. Right? Like that is the edge over models, is that we can see something and be like, City looked terrible and lost 4 games in a row. This guy obviously shouldn't be in our team right now. And models can't see that. But I decided to ignore that anyway. So good job by me.
I mean, there'll be a lot of people using models you probably watch as well. So I mean, the models do take into account this stuff. It does get inputted, but obviously, it does wait longer.
That's the thing. It's it waits.
You won't see it as much. Yeah, it won't.
Exactly. Yeah. Like and same with Mo at the end of the season, right? He was kind of off it, and Liverpool took their foot off the pedal and whatever. But I'm sure like every week he was probably like EV number 1 captain, but anyone who was like kind of checked in wasn't really captaining him until game week 38.
Cool. The last couple of things I'll just read out. So out of the 3 of us, I benched the most points, 318. Alon benched the least with 204.
Look at that. You'll
Alon,
never sing that.
Your great success, by the way, against everyone else, as far as I can work out, your differential expected value, which is to say the players who could have gained you the most potentially if it went well, was 99.3% against the top 1,000 managers. So if it had worked, you'd have been number 1.
I mean, it's one of those things that sounds so stupid in hindsight, right? Mo has the most points anyone's ever scored in the game. He's also the best player to have ever existed in the game. And I went against him every week for like 20 straight weeks. But like you said, if any of those times I captained Haaland, I just got lucky and Mo hit the post instead of scoring, I would have had a gigantic jump. Like I would have leaped hundreds of thousands of places just on that one captaincy decision. But what happened over and over again is like he just never blanked. He just literally never blanked. It was just goal assist every week for so long.
It's like gambling. It's a gambling thing, isn't it? It's what it feels like, doesn't it? You're losing the money, and it's like, I just need, if I can just double it back, I'll make it back. Oh,
exactly.
Double it the next week.
I mean, the cherry on top of all of this is game week 28. It was I captained Palmer. Me and Walsh both captained Palmer. Mo was starting a little bit of a decline, the annual Ramadan decline, and he gets 2 penalties, home Southampton. Everyone captained Mo. He gets 2 pens, scores both, brace, and Chelsea barely win 1-0 against Leicester at home. And it was just like, there we go again.
Right, Danny, I'm going to apologize because I've obviously not seen.
No, so you do this. Do you want to do this team of trolls now, or should we go to some of those sort of learnings and questions and do this? We'll come back to the team.
Yeah, we could do. We could come back to this a bit later. That's fine. No, good idea. Actually, so we had. We're going to get into some of our learnings for the season now. In just a minute. Like this kind of. To be honest with you, the list of questions I've got in front of me, 3 of them are very much kind of about kind of learnings and that sort of thing, and then the rest of them are a bit quicker. So I guess we can get straight into the kind of learnings here. By the way, this is the segment that's going to go on for potentially a while, so if anyone does need to break for the loo at any point, just put up your hand. It's absolutely fine.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm going to throw this out there. There's sort of three related questions, but I'll start with Mikey's, who sent one in, and then there's some sort of sub questions that I'll chuck in at some point when I can. So he says, what is the biggest lesson or takeaway which you actually implement next season? So he's interested in not just a learning, but something that's going to make you behave differently and think differently. Because I think it's quite easy to get a learning, isn't it? But to actually use it to make a difference is what Mike is. I mean, he's in the top 600, so I don't know what we can do to help him. But I mean, Alon, I think we should probably come to you first because you've had a crack at these kind of questions already.
Yeah.
Give us a chance to think. But is there a takeaway where you think, well, actually, do you know what? I've seen that now, and it might help for next season?
I have maybe 3 answers. I'll try and not ramble too long here, but I have 3 answers that are all, I would say, contenders. One of them is, let's just quote the man of the hour, Danny, players who play. You know, just, and it's not even that specific point of like, get the guys who play for the points. I want more transfers to use on the other parts of my team. I want to roll more with the, punts or whatever, the mid-price mids, if I stick to players who play, so I can use transfers more on other parts of my team. Like I brought this up last night, but every week that I was holding Holland instead of Mo, I was on like 1 free. But there's a whole nother world there where maybe one of those weeks I was on 4 frees, and I would have just been like, you know what? Fuck this. Like, why am I doing this? I can do it for free. I can use 3 transfers, get 3 guys I like, and fix it. But I was never really in a position where it felt like a right move to make. To do that, not just to make a swap of 2 great players, but also to make it a hit. It just felt like insane. Another one is, shout out to you, Rich, is just trying to not pay attention to my overall rank. I mean, I don't even want to ever talk about our team, but our fans get mad if we don't start the podcast with our teams. That's literally the only reason we do it. But the thing that I think is interesting is that, I think I brought this up last time. I don't remember, but let's take Danny's team, for instance. Great season, great rank, average game week rank of 2.3 million. That's the target. That's where you want to actually be. Your overall rank fluctuates, like it's hard to even wrap your head around overall rank because everyone's doing different things and using chips at different times. But if you hover around a 2.5 million average game week rank, you're killing it. Right. And so like, I'm trying to think in that context more because obviously the bad weeks happen to every manager, no matter what your rank is. You'll have a bad week from time to time. But if you have a 4 million game week rank 1 week and you offset it with some flyer of a, banger game week rank, that's good, right? Like, it's almost like you get another bullet in the chamber. Like every great game week you have, you've allowed yourself, okay, I can have a 3.5 million game week rank and be I'm on track for top 1K if I keep this up. So I want to stop looking at my overall rank. It doesn't even matter. It only tilts me. It never does anything good for anyone. And maybe the game week rank is more relevant overall. And then the last thing that I talked about a lot on last night's pod is just listening to my gut more and just making sure that the decisions I make are my own and something that I really believe in. Because the most tilted that I get from season to season is when I pick someone that I didn't believe in and I got convinced or, herd mentality or whatever the reason was that I went for them, and then they fail. And then I'm just like, what am I doing here? I don't even like this guy anyway. I don't even believe in this team anyway. And that makes it twice as tilting for me. Whereas if it's someone I love and rate and think they're a great pick and they don't work out, it's like, okay, I can be okay with that because, I followed my process. whatever the example is, Palace scored 4 goals. It's okay that as a blanked, I thought Palace were going to be good, and they were good, and I just, as a didn't, get his toe on the ball, and that's okay. But yeah, those moments where, like, I have Saka in my Gaming 38 free hit team. I'm trying to have a fun free hit team of low-owned guys, and I just get convinced by everyone being like, you should probably have Saka. And I'm like, I guess I'll just get Saka. And he doesn't even fucking start. And I'm just like, oh my God, I'm such a, whatever. But I think those 3 are things that I will try to bring into next season.
That's nice. I will come back to you, by the way, in a few minutes, Alon, with there's a very specific couple of things that I was thinking about for you as well, because I think it's really helpful. We've talked about this with other managers before, where it's important to find your circle, the kind of people who you trust. If you are someone who likes to sort of socially talk your ideas through, obviously Danny's really helpful for me. I'm probably less useful for him, but nevertheless, I'm here. Mikey, people like that, really, really helpful. Whereas, putting them out to the masses or being affected by that is a very different beast, and so on. So that's something to think about. But we'll come to that in a few minutes' time. So I'll hand over to Danny for his kind of learnings first.
Well, I want to just touch on Alon's first, I suppose, because I'm listening to him. I'm just thinking about him. I mean, first of all, the rank thing is really interesting. So I still question its benefit, but I think it also depends on how you actually go about not looking at your rank. Because I think with Rich, I'm still not sure which way it works. Like I say, because there was many times this season watching him where, again, this is partly because also Rich manages our SKW team, so he has to inspect other people's teams a lot, and he comes on the pod with me, and I obviously had a good season, and so I'm not sure how much it helped him this season, because every time he had a good week, he didn't know.
Oh yeah,
He sort of didn't. It didn't give him any joy, because some other people had a good week, some around him, some didn't. He might have had a green arrow and he was distraught all weekend. Other weeks he didn't have as good a week, and he also knew that, because you can kind of guess again by looking at other people's teams. I think it's a great thing to do. I suppose it's how you do it. And I think our friend Ivan, who's Royzer, who's I don't know if you know him, Alon.
I know of him. He was the originator, right, of not looking at rank.
And I think he's a more pure approach in that, and he's certainly stepped back from online a bit. And I'm in a group chat with him and speak to him, most days of the week. And I know that he often doesn't really know who are in our team, because he's not checking. He doesn't even go on the app because he doesn't want to accidentally look at the ranks. He doesn't really look at the teams.
Right.
So he fully doesn't care, and he is playing very, very freely. I think he probably cares a little bit less about the game. To what extent? I think it definitely helps well-being for a lot of people, because if you do it in the right way, because you can just sort of forget about it and get on with it. How much it helps rank, especially at the end of the season, I don't know. But I think it's a really interesting concept. I just think it's how you go about doing it. So there's definitely a discussion next. I'm sure Rich wants to think about it. He's got to think about it next year, and there are pros and cons. Go on, Rich, you want to speak?
No, well, I may as well speak to this. I have thought about it a bit, and I think Alon probably in a similar position to me on this. Like, for someone like Ivan, FPL Royzer, it probably does work, because he can take a step back. He's got that kind of mind anyway, I think, where he's able to do it and that sort of thing. With Alon, obviously, overseeing a preeminent podcast, a public figure of sorts, and me managing a group of other very good managers. So in our SKLW team, I think it's something like 10 out of the 16 were in the top 25k. Which is mental, by the way, or something like that. It was a crazy number, really unusual season, but nevertheless, like, they're really, really impressive. But I think what I did say earlier to the question actually was that how do I ignore rank? Well, I can see it as a blur, and I can block it out anyway by this point. So I wonder whether I almost can just go back to being aware of it, but it not really affecting me, just because I don't think it really matters to my process unless it's game week 37 or 8 or something like that. So I wonder whether maybe I could approach it a little bit on that. But I suppose that the message is not so much not knowing it, but it's not letting it affect you, right? Those are probably two
right. That is different. Yeah, it's a different approach to the same goal, sort of. Yeah, so I guess I need to think about it more, because I don't really know how I'll do a podcast without knowing my rank, and how I'll, and like you said, Danny, I would be afraid of being like, I had a shit week, my captain playing blah blah blah, and then Walsh is sitting there being like, you're flying, and I wouldn't even know.
But I think that the point that Danny's making, I guess, which is true, is that someone who's as engaged as you and engaged as I, in whatever capacity, even if it's more engaged with the kind of community or the podcast aspect of it, rather than the football itself, is that you will know anyway. I suppose.
Yeah, basically.
Like, like if Semenyo bangs and you had him captain, your rank's gonna get really good. So it is. There is an element of anyway. So I get that kind of point. But yes, I generally want my kind of Saturdays for me to be the guy who does this. Just to sit there and kind of meditate out and so on. Anyway, let's go back to Danny's learnings, and we'll come back to me.
Yeah, and I just want to say, because another thing that Alan said about making your own decisions. I mean, there is nothing more important in the whole of FPL, and this might be obvious, whatever, than your process and being happy with your process. There's nothing more important by a mile, because it's a horrible, punishing game that does ruin many of our weekends. I was much better about it. I always say that. I do exaggerate slightly. I was bad a couple of times this season, but generally I've been much better, and I'll come on to that as a learning as well. The process is so important. I've said this a million times, is that that my personal thing, but I think it's because I am naturally not, I don't want to say influenced, but I suppose I do naturally have, my emotional brain. I'm reading a book at the moment about, it's about something completely different actually, but it's talking a lot about evolutionary psychology at the moment. And it's really interesting because just the last few, but I mean, this sort of thing is obvious as well. And I know it as well, but it was just the last few pages that I was reading, just last night, is so interesting and so relevant to FPL. But it was talking about conformist bias. Okay, and I know it's just another bias, but it was talking about social learning and a really profoundly important, deep-rooted kind of psychological thing in all humans that's evolved. We're evolved to conform with the group.
Right.
It's deep-rooted within us, because conforming with the group is the safest and most efficient strategy across so many environments, so many scenarios. The people who did that are more likely to survive. It's just as simple as that. So I know that's really obvious, but when you think about that, we're all playing this game that's perfectly fitted to kind of, because it isn't black and white, to make these subjective decisions. Is perfectly vulnerable to this conformist bias, and we're all totally guilty of it all the time, and it's so easy to slip into. It also talked, by the way, about what's called prestige bias as well, which is really interesting, because there's one other thing outside of conformist bias that can influence us or even overwhelm it, and which is prestige bias. And when somebody's kind of pinned as being an expert in their area or a real expert, also a very safe and programmed survival skill is to get close to that person and do what they do. Because of course, if somebody is considered to be very skilled, back in the day, if you were if someone was, back in the day when everyone had bows and arrows, if someone was considered to be the best bow and arrow shooter, it's a good thing to try and do what they do.
That's smart.
And be around them and do what they do and make friends with them. Kind of thing. So there's also this thing where even like, it's just crazy. It's like even just people with loads of followers online. Followers is the perfect word for human beings to kind of to
navigating all these different things. I find to be so difficult, right? Because I often think about like the wisdom of the crowd, which I think is more of a like investor type of people, stocks and stuff is where that's used more. But obviously it applies in FPL too, right? The idea or the experiments that were done basically showed that, I mean, I might be butchering this, but like with like non-experts, if there's a diverse enough and a large enough sample from non-experts, they often make a better guess or decision or estimate than one individual expert, right? Which is really fascinating and weird to think about. But if you apply it to FPL, it's confusing, because it's like, okay, there is wisdom of the crowd at play sometimes, right? There's some guy who's 60% owned in Game Week 1 teams, and I haven't even considered him. It's like, I should probably consider that player. But at the same time, the prestige bias that you were just talking about, Danny, it's like, well, if everyone's just copying, Let's Talk FPL Andy's team, then it's no longer wisdom of the crowd, right? It's just everyone's following one thing, and it's actually just a few experts that sort of like make the majority of the teams. It's no longer wisdom of the crowd. It's really confusing.
Yeah, that is really interesting. Like how much of it, if at all, is wisdom of the crowd, and kind of doing what everyone else does is again.
We need like 1,000 Ivans that we can poll independently of each other and just be like, so what do you think about, Dorgu game week 1, and just see what they think. And that would be wisdom of the crowd, but obviously it's impossible.
Yeah, and this is it. And this is what I've said loads of times, and so I hope I'm not repeating myself, but my approach, because I know I'm vulnerable to that, is I shut myself off from everything. And I also try to solidify decisions early in the week, as you know. I don't expose myself to opinions. I don't ask for them generally. And it's not because I don't want them, and it's not because I don't respect other people's views, but it's incredibly important to me that the decision that I make, I can feel what the process is, and that I know, and that I know what my decision was or what I felt was best before anything else. And so if I don't have that, I'll block myself out for the whole week. I remember I think it was like game week 38, and this is a very much an extreme last resort for me when I will ask someone. So, for example, I was really stuck. My decisions were all elsewhere. I didn't have much time to think all week. I couldn't really choose between Munoz and Milenkovic in the last week. And even though it might sound little, and I'm in a group, one of the group chats with Ivan and LR and Baker and Zoff, people like that, and I literally had it typed out thinking, has anyone got any strong feelings between these two? But I literally didn't press the button until about 2 minutes before the deadline, because I thought, no, I don't want to
send. Oh my God, yeah.
I don't want to question yet, because I need to feel something first. I need to have some kind of process first. So it was such a last resort, because the opinions will flood in straight away, and people will have opinions on those sort of things. Or this is what I'm doing anyway, or this is what I'm going to do, and straight away you're poisoned. You have all of this bias, and all these biases suddenly take over, and then you think, did I make a decision because someone else did it, or did I make it because that was really what I wanted to do? And that is, for me, the worst thing you can ever do going into a game. And
I'm similar to you there. I think part of it, and I'm no psychologist or whatever, but I think part of it is just losing ownership can sometimes just feel good. It's just all the stress just goes away if I just listen to what Richie says, right? Because now it's no longer my decision. Richie made it. If it doesn't work out, I'll be pissed off, but I didn't make a mistake. Richie did. You know what I mean? But obviously that's not true.
I don't know whether this is the best example, Alan.
Yeah, well, you know what I mean. It's anyone. I just want you to be involved, so I'm throwing your name in here. But it's a temptation thing for me. It's my season's already going badly. I don't know who to captain. Everyone's captaining Mo. I'll captain either Palmer or Holland. I'll just ask LR and whatever whatever he says, whatever. And then but that temptation is just, it only leads to more negativity, at least in my case. So it's something I definitely need to avoid. But it's so hard to do what you're talking about, Danny, for me, when I pod every Monday, every Thursday, live stream every Friday. I'm just, opinions are everywhere. Everywhere I look, there's, opinions.
They are, but it is kind of the same with me. So,
yeah.
You've got a pod to do on Monday, which is challenging, and I would find that challenging, because it means you need to really think about, watch. I'm sure you do. You watch the football on the weekend, and that's when your main decisions. And I'm not telling you what to do. This is what I do. Is what I mean is that's when my main decisions are formed. Is when I'm watching the game.
That's what I need to do
on the weekend. Yeah. So that I'm building up my shields and my robustness against what I'm going to hear from other people, because not because I don't want to listen, but because I need to have that process. So you've got to find ways to put barriers up, and it's just so important. But yeah, I mean, I just want to say a couple of things, and I hope I don't ramble on too much here, and I hope this isn't too obvious, too boring. But one of the things I said to Alan a few weeks ago, and it's not necessarily a lesson for me, because it's what it's a lesson every season, and I say the same thing every season, and it's how long the season is, right, and how much goes on in the season. It's actually insane, and that sounds like a really silly kind of vacuous thing to say, but it's not. It's so important, and for so many reasons. But so many people think the season's over because of one player or this and that, and it's like game week 10 or game week. I mean, that's what I'm going to come to, because even more than ever, I think that's now not the case. And to give you one example, right? And this isn't just about how long the season is, which is hugely important, but it's also about how many different paths and channels there actually are to points. Because what we often do, and I've been guilty of always, is we pinpoint these 1 or 2 crucial decisions and say it's all down to that. It's all come down to this player or that player. We all do it, and I'm not just. And again, just remember that the whole time I'm talking, I'm not just talking about the Salah Haaland thing, because that was massive. Just put that to one side. That was horrible. I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about generally season to season. We tend to come up with these in our minds of stories, the certain things that stand out, the things that we remember about where the points were won or lost. And I just think it's actually so much more than that. And one of the things that even helped me to see that in another new light was I was listening to the Fantasy Football Scout Pod, Burning Questions in the week, and it's FPL Harry, who's obviously he's finished 6K or something, top 10K.
Wow. Okay. Nice.
You know, he's a good manager, and he's had lots of very good finishes. And I've obviously through his X channel and, you know, seeing his posts and videos, I've kind of had a feeling about what his season's been like in terms of the players that he's had, and I've often thought, oh, that's different, or this and that has been different to me. So, and then I was listening to some of on their review this week, and I thought, this is actually amazing, because I was thinking about the differences to my team, and so I had a look, and again, this is really obvious, so just forgive me, tell me to shut up, otherwise I know it's obvious, but it's opening up your eyes to these different channels of points, right? So, and how different a path, for example, Harry took in terms of where all these different points can come from. So when I was looking, right, in game week 10, for example, he was 120k.
Wow.
Right. And I was 1.4 million, right? And that was after I'd got Palmer for 25.4 goal, right?
Wow.
So game week 10, I was like 1.5 million. He was 120k. Now, I had a look at some of the things that Harry got that I didn't get, for an example, for one person in terms of points through the season, right? So for example, he got, so if you remember, I got 4 points from a triple captain total and 6 points from a bench boost total.
I forgot to bring that up for Walsh. Yeah, holy shit.
Right. So Harry, for example, so he was 120k. I was 1.5 million. He got 30 points on his bench boost. He got 29 points triple captain Salah. We both got pretty similar assistant managers. He got 51-point assistant manager. He had, for example, the Ahmad hat trick, which is like a 20-pointer.
Give me a break.
On that week. He had the Wood hat trick that I didn't have, another nearly 20-pointer. He had Wood from the start of the season as well, by the way. He had Murphy, Jacob Murphy, all the way through that period where the guy literally was just, I don't even want to talk about him. And it was a shocking amount of points that he got.
How did he not win FPL? I don't know.
That's what I mean, right? So these are all things I didn't have. Murphy throughout that whole period. He had Concer's 15-pointer and Watkins captain on game week 37, which also destroyed me. And he had Bowen in game week 38. To take some other examples, he had in game week 24, he got 149-pointer. Right, that was when I was on Moyes' assistant manager, and I got
triple captain Salah.
Moyes got like 22. He triple captain Salah. So even with Moyes' assistant manager, I got 128. He got 149. And then even the week after, I'm still on Emre assistant manager, right? I got 93 points. With no chip, he got 99.
Oh my God.
Right. So, and I know I'm just pulling out all the things that he got that I didn't get. Think about how many things, and this is just some obvious ones that I found. And I finished above him.
Yeah, and if you would have asked me before that sequence of events, I would have assumed that like you had, I don't know, 80% of those. You know, just by not going through your team week to week. I just thought everyone who did well had all of those.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Exactly. And I'm not trying to say what I didn't have, because obviously I had lots of good things.
For sure.
Bruno captain, 29, all sorts of things. But when I sort of think about that, and I'm thinking, well, how did I finish above him? Where did my points come from? And it's just an amazing example of how it's just there's so many every week of these paths to these huge amounts of points. I mean, what I reeled off there was like at least 150 points worth of stuff. Yeah. It's just they're just single occasions. And I just think it's so important to not just understand how long the season is, but just how many paths there are. And it's never one player or even 2 or 3 is never terminal. And again, put aside the Salah and Haaland thing, because that was captaincy for so many weeks. It was ridiculous. But I just think that's amazing. And I also think that in line with that, you know, I think knowing that kind of thing, one of the things I can take forward is being a little bit braver still in, for example, game week 1. and not so much thinking about that kind of conformity and worry. You know, for example, some of those picks, like I did really feel good about Chris Wood in Game Week 1, and I did put Muniz in the end because I was pretty close between them, but everyone else was on Muniz, and I thought, I'm just gonna kind of go with the crowd on that one, for example. And I just think it's I'm not saying be stupid in Game Week 1, because you still play sensibly. You still have your Salah and your Haaland and your right captains and your good structure and everything else. But if you're talking about one or two players that you feel good about and you're worried about the crowd, when you think about the length of the season and the paths to the points, it's kind of so ridiculous that we even have this kind of we gather around these few players. We all own, like, I don't know, whoever it is that's Game Week 1, that's like, whether it's a Quanta or back at these guys, it's just like, it's crazy. And also what I want to say, just the last thing I'll say along because the two are related, in terms of what I did this season and what I want to take forward next season, and the two are related. And one of the things I did this season, even though I didn't start well, is I did go into the season, and I said this on all the pods, I said this early on, and I said it on there. It's not a hindsight thing. With the Haaland v Salah thing, I was saying this is going to be one of the most punishing seasons ever, and I need to be ready for this. This is not going to be friendly, right? It's going to be horrible. And so therefore, I need to be super happy with my process, and I need to completely accept any variance and not get wound up, because, as long as you're happy with your process, loads of people are going to get screwed. And guess what they did? Loads of people who didn't get Salah got absolutely screwed unfairly. And so I was actually really calm early season, even though I didn't start well. It was my worst ever start. And as I say, I was about 4 million just a few weeks before that, 1.5 million in Game Week 10 or whatever it was, which is okay. But a couple of weeks before that, I was like 4 million. And, in line with that, as well as all of those things, one thing that I think loads of people still didn't get this season was just how tightly packed it is now. And it was. And so rank, at that time, there were people who were like 4 million, 5 million, but they were literally about 20 or 30 points, for example, behind me in 1 millionth. And I was kind of I was screaming it on X, going, people go, oh, my season's, it was like Game Week 3, and people are going, my season's over, I'm 5 million. I'm going, trust me, just it's a different thing now, because everyone is so engaged with content. Everyone's team is so similar. There are hardly any big differences, especially early on when nobody knows what's really going on. You've got a kind of model template that's pretty much everyone's template now, because all of the content creators are influenced by the models anyway. But it's so tightly packed. So it was like, don't even think necessarily about the rank, never mind how long the season is. And so do you see what I mean? It's like, it's about not panicking, not just because of how long the season is, but because it is incredibly tightly packed, and was up until, I don't know, even in Game Week 20 and stuff like that. People made incredible jumps. It's not like it used to be. The game isn't like it used to be. And I mean, just I was looking at my Game Week history, and I think even those weeks, even just bringing Salah in Game Week 10. Remember what you said just then, Alan? Like, loads of people did it, and they did. I guess the majority of people, or that we saw online, did. And so even like Game Week 10, so I was 2 million Game Week 8, 1.4 million Game Week 10, made the switch to Salah, 1.4 million. You could be thinking, I'm not having a great start to the season. And it went to 900K, 400K, 200K, 200K, 100K. And not only that, but, to put some context in that, the last thing I'm going to say is, these weren't like ridiculous game weeks. It was like, there was a 2.3 million game week rank, 1.1 million. There was a 300K, which is very good, a couple of 300Ks. Then there was a 3.5 million game week rank, which, barely moved me. And it's just, you see what I'm saying? So the point was, it's just, I still think people won't take this forward next season, because people just look at rank. It is incredibly tightly packed. You do not need to panic. You just need your process. So that's one of my take homes.
I mean, you're playing yourself, really. I mean, it's a sort of like a cliche, like, I don't know, platitude or something to say that in this kind of game, but you really kind of are. And that's why I think that not looking at your rank thing does work for some people. But if you have a good process and you're picking good picks and you're not panicking and you're doing all these basic things, like, you'll probably do okay.
Yeah, and on that, Alan, I think it's worth remembering, isn't it? I know that I'm the one who probably usually comes in and is perhaps a little bit kind of more emotive or romantic about certain things, but I think you're with the question about why we're playing, and rank is obviously part of that picture, but you know, it could easily be said, couldn't it, that, you know, one would rather finish 10,000 places less if they were just enjoying the game that they were playing, or following their own decisions, as Danny makes out, because I think that is pretty central to it as well. There, just before I go on to kind of my piece on this, there were a couple of questions about rank. Danny, I don't think everyone knows. I don't know if you want to share that, but where you finished in the end.
I'm gonna run to the bathroom.
Yeah, go for it.
In the rank,
you don't want to hear this bit. You don't want to hear this bit.
It was. I remember because I said it just before. Because someone asked me. It was 3,494. 3,494. So 3.5K.
Nice. And someone asked, what would I have guessed my rank was if I didn't look? I mean, to tell you the truth, this is kind of the point of what I said earlier on, is that, you know, you can't be so engaged and not have a rough idea. I thought to myself, well, I know I'm not going to be in the 10K, and I know I'm going to be in the 100K. So in a way, it wasn't a great surprise, because I'm aware of all the managers around me. I'm talking to the sort of 16 managers in my SKLW squad and all that kind of stuff. So it's very hard. And actually, I mean, we were podding, weren't we, Danny, since game week, I don't know what, 8, something like that, maybe 8, 12, something like that. It was that kind of second international break, and, you know, there weren't many occasions in which you went down a very different path to me, so it wouldn't have been, you know, completely shocking. Anyway, just on that. Whilst Alon's away, then I guess I'll get into a little bit of what my kind of takeaways are. I mean, obviously, a lot of them I don't want to repeat too much, but I think knowing kind of how we play the game and the mentality that we individually know that we adopt after this level of experience, because like I say, I've been playing this for sort of 20 years. It's kind of embarrassing now. I think what I would like to do is really internally recognize the importance and the value of each transfer just a little bit harder, because I think I want to guard them almost like a kind of angry mother bird, you know, sitting on her eggs. You know, I think I can just think, I know that wouldn't necessarily be the case for everyone, and of course, yes, there are opportunities you could miss and that sort of thing, but I know my own mind, I know my own style. I would be much happier with that kind of level of security and that level of optionality, or whatever it might be, if I could just simply avoid some of these pitfalls and stack up a few. Some of the reasons why I think I've taken so many hits this season is because I don't like being in that position where I'm having to constantly kind of fight all the kind of flags in my squad. And if I could just be a little bit more secure, then I'm one of those managers that will be very difficult. It reminds me, when I was younger, the best sport I had in my kind of locker, I was a good cricketer, and I was an absolute bastard to get out. It was impossible. You know, I was the kind of boring boycott of the cricket team or something like that. That won't surprise anyone, I'm sure. But, you know, if I get into that avenue, I'm very happy. I like other people putting their risks out there so that I can just bat them off. So there is an element of that, and that would suit me. So to internally increase the value of transfers and to work harder to avoid those hits seems like an obvious learning from me. Just before Alon comes back, because there is a very specific point that I want to lead on to Alon with. We had a really good question earlier. I'm just going to pop it in the chat just because it's a little bit useful, I think, for you to make a comment on this, Danny. I'm just going to bring it up on the screen, actually, if I can get it up there. So FPL Rhinos put this forward, just in case you want to comment on this before Alon comes back. How do we tell the difference between what is a learning to be taken forward next season and what is outcome bias? I mean, when I saw that, I immediately thought of actually something like the late era Palmer of the season, for example, where one could... I've heard a few pods this week who they've gone off on one. They're quite excited about the idea that Palmer is a sort of busted flush. And I kind of feel like that's immediately a learning that has limited value, to be honest with you, because I think the outcome could have been very different if let's say he had the extra 5 penalties that he did the season before. It would be talking about a 300-point player. So yeah, did you want to see that again? I'll put it up on the screen for Alon. Alon, I'm going to come back to you with some specific advice in a minute.
Yes.
Yeah,
this is why I'm here.
Just for you, from me though, so it's not as worth as much. But this was a question that was a sort of sub question, which I thought I'd throw at Danny. How do we tell the difference between what is a learning that can be taken forward and what is just outcome bias?
Yeah, I mean, in a minute, you'll have to give me some examples of outcome bias. I struggle with that, and maybe it's because I just don't think in that way in terms of learnings. But
Fair enough.
I think with learnings, I probably do, but I want some examples of how someone takes that forward, because it'd be interesting to talk about, because it's an interesting point, isn't it? But learnings to take forward for me can only be extracted from the process. So that might sound really obvious, but what you learn can only come from what you actually put into your decision-making process. So that might be, we talked about some kind of almost surface level, kind of almost superficial stuff. If you're not making your own decisions, well, there's a learning there, because if you can think about that, it's black and white, But in terms of what you can take, in terms of what you could do differently next season, it can only come from that clear process to me, where you've gone into the decision with a clear process, with a clear decision. You know what you did and why you did it, and therefore you can extract some learnings from that. It's an interesting one, because I think about sometimes, like, people who do use models very strictly. It's funny, because I see a lot of people who and again, there's no right or wrong here. It's just interesting to me. But I've seen a lot of people who maybe, for example, have a really bad season, and then they'll post their ranks and their FPL review ranks and their MD ranks, and those ranks will be good, and they'll finish 700k, 600k, 1 million, and say, well, variance giveth, variance taketh. Nothing to learn from next season. I played just as well as last season, and that's fine if that's what they want to do. And it's just, but that's interesting to me, because maybe part of that is because maybe if there's less going into the process, and I know that when using models, everyone still makes different decisions, and it's about your minutes and your players, and I know that there's lots of input, but there's potentially less of an input in terms of your thought process and over the week, and your evaluation of players individually and teams, because it comes more down to kind of minutes and the type of player. And it's just interesting to me that sometimes I see people, with these models, it's potentially you are taking less learnings, fewer learnings forward, because maybe it's about that process and what's going in. It's amazing to me when somebody just says, it's fine. That's fine if that's their way of playing, but if I can learn nothing from this, because and I've finished 800k. But again, I think it's not a slight. It's about the process, you see. So I do tend to take a lot of learnings, and I've taken fewer this season, because I think it's harder to take learnings from a really good season. That's the drawback of having a really good season. When I have really bad ones, I take loads forward, and I kind of refresh in so many ways, and there's loads of things I want to do differently. But I think just a short answer before you go, Rich, just very short on that point. How do you know? I think in line with all those things, because you actually know it, you feel it. It's black and white, and you can only know something. It's almost on an emotional level for me when it comes to a learning that I can take forward. It's something that is almost indisputable because of that process. Like our emotional brains, if you like, which is a lot of FPL, although they're simple, primitive things that usually make bad decisions in FPL. You can only reason with emotions, with facts and truths, absolute truths. It's the only way. We often experience an emotion or a feeling that we don't want to feel, and we can't get rid of it. Well, the only thing that it will deal with is absolute facts and truths, and that relates a little bit to FPL learnings for me. Like, I look for absolute facts and truths. That's what I look for, and that controls my emotion and my biases and things that I can take forward for next season.
Yeah.
And I think you can only find facts and truths through a very clear process in your each decision every week, or your kind of meta approach to the game. And so, yeah, my short answer is, it's probably a really stupid, convoluted way of saying it, but I just think the difference between a learning and an outcome bias. And I think if you don't know the difference between a learning and an outcome bias, your process is wrong.
It's kind of like red pill versus blue pill to me. I mean, in that sense of like, you know which one you're choosing, right? You're either like embracing that sort of ignorance and just being like, well, it wasn't luck because I knew he was going to score 2 goals. Like, you can tell yourself that, but I think it's not true. Whereas, like, the red pill might be more painful sometimes, because you might have to admit that you made some sort of mistake or whatever. But I think you're spitting wisdom there, Danny, is what I'm trying to say. Basically, I mean, like, I was talking about this earlier about, like, you're following your gut or whatever, but I did a really simple sort of like decision tree on the pod last night with Walsh, right? And it's like, if you follow your gut and the player does well, or let's word it differently. The player succeeds, whatever that specifically means to you, because that's to an individual's process, right? That's euphoric. Great job by you. You did a great thing. If you follow your gut and the player fails, again, whatever that means to you, that is the learning opportunity, right? That's exactly what you're talking about. That is the opportunity to re-examine your process, tinker with your process, figure out, oh, I was blinded by the fixtures, or I was scared of this player or this fixture or whatever. Insert a billion reasons we've all heard, and then you can tinker with it from there. Whereas if you go against your gut, aka you listen to something else or just follow someone else's thing, you never have the opportunity to learn. If it goes well, it's just, well, yeah, the model told me to captain solid, so I captain solid. It was great yet again. And if you follow someone else and it doesn't go well, it fails, there's nothing really to learn there other than like, I probably need a process of my own. And it usually manifests itself in just like anger. For me, at least, it's just like, what am I doing? Why am I playing the game if I'm not playing the game? You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
I was going to just go back to the start of your answer, actually, Danny, because just bring the question back up again, because Alan might have missed this, but the difference between a learning that can be taken forward and outcome bias. I mean, because two examples in my head sprung to mind straight away. I'm going to use some of Danny's season as an example here of the difference between something where there was, the outcome would say one thing, but the process might perhaps say another. Triple captain. So Danny triple captain Marmouche in game week 33. I think it's fair to say, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how many minutes he got. Let's say 170 or something, but he got 2 points on both occasions. Obviously. 180, sorry, yeah. And a number of people would have triple captained Haaland in either of the earlier game weeks, right? For 6 points in game week 9. I can't remember the other one. 17 points, I think it was in game week 2,
hat trick,
like that.
Yeah.
But I would still maintain regardless of the outcome, the process you adopted by trying to hold it for the double game week. I know we weren't sure how many there would be. Was a more sound decision that I would take into the future season. And another example is two players that will probably be in our team of the week, so to speak, to the worst team of the season. I'm going to throw two names here that lots of people were nominated, and that was Nicholas Jackson and Phil Foden. Now, I would argue that the process by which people went to choose Phil Foden was a bad process. It was a dubious process because we weren't sure on his minutes. We weren't confident that there was trust in the manager. We were only picking him because someone else got injured, something like that. Nicholas Jackson didn't have a great season either in some respects, but the stats were still pretty good. He was definitively, I think from memory anyway, number 9. Yeah, he was getting 75 minutes, quite a lot, but he was looking good. There could easily have been a situation where he was the premium, so to speak, 8 million-ish striker of choice. He could easily have had a really good season, and I would not think to myself, I won't pick him in future. I know he's potentially getting competition in that Chelsea squad, so that's a bit different, but I would say the outcome might say might suggest that both of them are problematic, but I would still have more confidence in a pick like Nicholas Jackson on that basis, and that's just kind of my thought on it. So there's a little bit of a difference there, but I mean, the person who sent that question, Rhinos, is a sage-minded veteran. He will know the difference, I'm sure. But it was an interesting question. Before anything further, I did say that I had a little bit of something specific to throw in, and particularly I want to start with Alon, and then I'm going to cut a few of these questions, by the way. We do have some more, but there are a few that I will not.
Should I lay down on a couch? Is it like that kind of thing? We get
therapeutic
over here.
I just want to start this because, like I say, it's really important to know, who your friends are and this kind of this, because FPL is cruel. It hates us. I know personally, I don't know whether you're like this, Alan. I struggle with this kind of thing of, when your friends do well, and I'm broadly quite a nice person. I do want my friends to do well, but there is that other sort of imp of the perverse, we would call it. And no one says that, by the way, but I've heard this phrase before, where you kind of secretly want your friends to do badly,
okay,
or something like this, right?
Yeah.
On the whole, we should, we're all weird here. I don't know why we're doing this, and we should try and kind of help each other, at least to help our friends kind of find sanity, even if they don't find success, right? So there is that. So I brought up this question, which is just this kind of sub question. This is one from me, actually. Is there any specific advice or observations you would you have to give another manager here? Because there are pods, like The Wire, where they're quite in tune with each other. They know how to give advice to each other. Some people are in really good group chats and that sort of thing. But I was thinking about you, and because I don't, there's obviously there are things I could say to Danny, but he obviously had a good season, so I don't know if it's as easy perhaps to give stuff out. I do think he's actually, the more I've thought about it, the more unlucky Danny has been this season, which seems weird for someone who's finished.
That's crazy.
3-4K.
Yeah.
So, maybe forget I said that, Danny, but there is an element of that.
I don't know about that, but I'll take it.
But with Alon, I was thinking you do have a similar kind of issue to me, I think, in some respects, and I wonder whether we could kind of help each other out a bit here, which is that, close your ears for a second, Danny. I think there is a danger because we're a little bit more persuadable. I mean, my note here says, be wary of being held captive by your pod partner. and what I mean by that is, like, you obviously, you do have to find a decision that you're happy with and that sort of thing. There are genuinely one or two occasions where I'm like, if I come in with this, I think Danny will absolutely hate this. And of course, to be fair, I should say it anyway because it's good content, right?
Yeah. Those are the clips.
But I was thinking, I have that a bit, but on the whole, my logic isn't a million miles away from Danny's anyway, in terms of the way I kind of choose things. I've often said to him, I don't necessarily even need to look at the models because I will probably know what the kind of straightforward path I would probably take is anyway, and that sort of thing. But I was thinking to myself about your relationship with Walsh, and like, obviously he's a good buddy of yours, but there is an element of he loves to stand back and watch the flames, right? There's an element of he's quicker to drive off the cliff, so to speak, than you. And I sometimes listen to you and I think to myself, do you know, inside Alon, there is a kind of, not boring, but there is a kind of manager who just wouldn't mind finishing 10K and treading a steady path. And actually, the good picks, and you know how to play and to do pretty well. And I was just thinking to myself whether there's a way that we could, the way that you or even your friends could help you in this respect is just actually, I know this would be the fun route, but there is a part of me that's thinking maybe it'd be fun for you just to play your, you actually know who the good picks are, so maybe do that for a while and see how it feels.
Yeah, I mean, I need to. That's the hard part.
There's an element of combustion after a certain point of the season type thing, but often I listen to you and I think you start really well and that sort of thing. So I don't know. That was the first thing that I thought. I know it's hard as a public facing pod host and that sort of thing, but
totally. But pre having a podcast when I was playing FPL, I think that I would be kind of more known as like a little like a mad scientist stylistically, not in the sense that I'm just exclusively taking punts. Like, I'm not like that kind of, but I was getting off meta guys. That was like the thing that I found the most fun and interesting in the game, was sort of finding those gems, just having this defender that no one owns, or this midfielder or whatever that no one's even talking about, that I'm just, by watching, I'm like, no, this guy's really good, and I want this player. And I haven't done that in 8 years. I totally lost my play style. It's something that we talk about all the time, and it's hard to gain back. It's easy to talk about and hard to actually, diagnose, kind of thing, where it's like, I think where a lot of FPL managers, myself included, sort of do themselves a disservice and flop is one moment they're trying to be conservative and they're going for conservative picks and rolling transfers. The next moment they're saying, that didn't work, I'm going to take a punt now to catch up and captain this off meta guy. That didn't work. Okay, I'll go back to being conservative. And then 10 weeks later, now I'm going to take a punt again. It's like, you're never going to get the best of either strategy unless you stick with it. right? You're never gonna captain the not the 5% owned hat trick if you just do it once every 15 game weeks. And simultaneously, you're not going to get the benefit of like rolling transfers and being conservative and keeping it tight if you occasionally just rip all your transfers out for fun for a random punt, right? So it's sort of like, again, it's all back to sort of like process and tactics and the way you like to play and whatever, but you also have to like stay that course, I think, in order to, you know, sort of reap the rewards.
Yeah, that's
think-
good. Cool.
I think just sort of talking about those points and thinking out loud. I think some people as well, I don't know, it's like a skill to me, want there to be more moves in the game and want there to be more things happening.
I
in the
feel
game.
that way.
Yeah, and it's quite a challenging thing. And I do think that sometimes watching your pod, not necessarily from you, Alan, but it might be from Walsh or whatever, but sometimes, and a lot of people do it, is looking for something to do, to move some pieces, looking to change someone, looking for a transfer, looking for a captain. And one of the skills in this game, especially now, it's so hard with so many people playing, but especially now, is one of the skills. Sometimes for many weeks, you just have to sort of sit through it and go, actually, this is a week where it's time to roll. Yes, I'd like to spend a week thinking about it. Yes, I'd like to make a move. Yes, I'd like to get a differential in who no one owns. But I've done that many times this season, and probably last season as well, where I've just this is one where I actually take a lot of joy in it now, and I'm sure a lot of other people do as well. But I take a lot of joy in sitting out for a week and going, no, I quite like it because I feel good about how this is going to put me in what position this is going to put me in 2 weeks, in 3 weeks. This is even more so now with the 5 transfers thing. It's even more so because I always say there's nothing better than rolling a transfer in FPL. There's nothing better than rolling a transfer in FPL. It's the best thing. It's the best feeling. It's one of my favorite feelings, apart from probably goalkeeper points, is when the deadline passes and I haven't made a transfer and I just see this little number in my head go from 1 to 2 or from 2 to 3. And I just think, oof, look at me. I've just gone Super Saiyan. I've just gone from Super Saiyan level 2 to Super Saiyan level 3.
This is what everyone needs to do this is how you win, I feel.
And that is how I feel. And you're in such a stronger position. And
I mean, my friend Liam once said, you know, he posted his team or his rank or something and someone asked him something along the lines of like, oh my God, like, don't you like hate your fucking team or you want a wild card out of this team or something? And I remember his response just being like, well, I'm happy with all of the players. I'm just unhappy with the numbers next to their name, but the numbers change every week. Right. And that's just like sort of a very simplified way of thinking like, wait. Those things are totally separate. Like you could be happy with all of these names and rate all of these players and they're good picks. Actually, the numbers change. Just relax. You know, the numbers always change.
I just remembered. Sorry, I'll come back to whatever that question is in a second. But I just remembered a really good example of this as well. Like this season, my best week by far this season, which was one of these just sitting there and let it happen weeks. And guess what? Glorious things happen sometimes when you sit there. Because often as well, when you sit there and you do nothing, everybody else is doing something. And sometimes it becomes the differential. And
that is the differential, actually. Yeah.
And that week, for example, I had a week this season with the assistant manager with Glasner and stuff. My game week rank was 253rd or something. So obviously that's
crazy,
ridiculous week. But I rolled. Oh no, I put Glasner in, but everybody else looked at my team and thought you need to make a move because I played a 4-5-1. You know, I played a 4-5-1 because I liked the position of doing nothing there, and I liked the position of taking a transfer or whatever it was, or not taking a hit. I felt comfortable with that, and I'm just looking now. I even had João Pedro 12 points on the bench that week.
I don't know if this is the same week, by the way, but I'm sure it was 140.
No, that must have been a different week. But I had 127.
No, it's this week. 140 game week rank.
Oh right, yeah, 140 game week rank. Yeah, sorry, yeah, you're right.
Insane.
Sorry, yeah, 140 game week rank. But that was a week where where other than I did attack assistant manager, but that wasn't, you know, loads of people like Glasner. The difference makers was actually me not doing anything. It was the 4-5-1. It was the 4 in defense. You know what I mean? Anyway, it's just a nice example of that. And I always think people don't value that enough. But I love it. It's my favorite thing in the game, and I think that's quite a nice thing. My favorite thing in the game is doing nothing. Is sitting on what you've got and growing stronger.
Zen God.
Yeah, and often, often in that process, you do know that on paper your team isn't as good, or you've maybe got one or two players that you don't have that everyone else has. But I always say to people as well, this sounds like a really obvious lesson, and people probably again think this is a stupid, obvious thing to say, but it's just because I'm saying something that I'm thinking, and I'm thinking about it in a very different way. But I always say to people, think about the players that you do have rather than the players that you don't have.
Mm.
And I can't remember what the latest example of that was, but everyone was really worried about a certain captain. I think it was the week with Watkins, which fair enough, Watkins did end up a bit better. But the point that week was, and everyone slating me for captaining Palmer. And again, I've repeated it 1,000 times. I captained Palmer because I saw it as an opportunity. He's a great player, and I didn't have the team structure to get Watkins. It didn't make any sense. It was, for me, it was fine. But so mmany people even took hits to get Watkins at that point, or so many people, weren't planning that transfer because they became terrified of who they didn't own. And it's hard to explain what I'm saying. It's almost an ineffable feeling, but it's such a huge shift between thinking who you don't own and who you do, because in that week, for example, everyone's panicking about Watkins. It's just one of many examples where it's not what happens if Watkins bangs. You just need your captain to get some points. So it doesn't require tearing up your team. The question should be, are you happy with your captain? Do you like your captain?
Right,
A lot of people had Bumo captain, who's an incredible player. And so you can objectively look at that player and say, are you happy with that player captain? Yes, I am. Because my captain just needs to get some points. If any captain got any points, really, that's a massive defense against Watkins. Anything that Watkins, who by the way is a striker anyway, he's not really going to go off.
I mean, you just summed it up with that. Sorry, I cut you off, but the FPL Harry team, right? You can't have every point that's scored. Like it's literally impossible to have every goal that goes in be in your team. It's not possible. There's too many good players and too many good teams. So yeah, like you say, I mean, you just gotta accept that sometimes I don't have the points. Sometimes I don't have the best captain of the week. It's okay. The rest of my team's good. I like my guys, whatever. Yeah.
One last thing I'll say. So we're talking about interesting stuff anyway. So, or at least I think we are. Because I have just thought of something, not advice, but something that's an observation of mine, because it's not right or wrong. And I'm thinking about watching other pods, and because you're here, Alan, I can talk. Because by the way, I watch FML obviously every week. I'm sure that's
thank you.
FML, FPL, Alon, Walsh, easily one of the best pods that exists, and it's just one of the very few that I watch every single week. So
thanks, gang.
I kind of felt like I knew Alon before we even started speaking.
I know.
Speaking online on DMs for years, but I kind of feel like you know someone. I kind of feel like I know Walsh, and I've never spoken to him.
Yeah.
But what's interesting to me, and a lot of people take this sort of similar approach, and I think of Andy Martin here as well, because I wonder if he ends up listening. But I always think that he always calls himself a fixtures man, and I always think that fixtures are his greatest strength, but also his greatest weakness. And what interests me is sometimes when I'm watching FML, and sometimes it might be Walsh, because he's a bit like me, talks a bit more and opinionated and just says what he thinks. Often there'll be weeks where you're just like, there'll be like a player with a fixture. Maybe it's Marmouche who's got a good fixture, or maybe it's Isak with a good fixture, or someone who's a good player with a good fixture, and you'll just be like, he's just nailed on captain this week for me. Like it's just nailed on. It's fascinating. It's almost refreshing, because you're a little bit. You're not as involved in the community, and you're not actually as involved in the masses of thousands of people who are making certain moves. So it's kind of refreshing to see that sometimes.
Yeah.
Often when I see that sort of thing, my approach, and again, it's no right or wrong, it happens to have gone well recently, is I'm less of a fixtures man and a bit more weight on just the caliber of a player. So the number of times
form, would you say, or
a bit of form, but also just the caliber of a player.
Yeah,
The number of times this season, for example, where I've heard that on maybe your pod or on someone else's, which is interesting to me, and it's like, oh, I definitely captained this player. For me, there's so many more unknowns with certain players that are not quite the same caliber. And I'm just thinking, well, no, obviously I'm just going to captain Salah, because someone like Salah, it's a bit like Messi or Suarez, or it's kind of like that, isn't it? Where the caliber is so extreme that there's so many paths to points, the 90 minutes, the penalties, the free kicks, and all this baseline stuff, a bit like Bumo almost these days, which is crazy, but not quite obviously not the same. And so to me, it's always a kind of simpler process. And I often just watch it and think, no, don't, like and it's fine, even if you want to captain him, but a lot of the time you guys will be like, no, it's nailed on. And I'm like, wow, like I'm definitely just captaining Salah that week.
Yeah.
Like the caliber of a player. And I don't know, it's less, again, it's another example of something. I think it came to me because it's less exciting again. The number of weeks where I do just captain Salah or whatever. I don't know. I look for exciting picks elsewhere. I just captaincy is just such a big thing in FPL, isn't it? And
Yeah.
I don't know. For me personally, it's massively weighted by the caliber of the player as well as the team, as well as the fixture and stuff like that. But I think the biggest weight is still the player. So it's someone like Salah or Palmer.
I mean, so sometimes these kind of things I think sound, I don't know the word, like trite or something like that, where it's like, you're trying to put like a generality on like the entire every game week or something like that. But what I was going to say sounds even more so probably is like the best teams beat the worst teams more often. Right? Like, obviously that's true. We don't even need to check the tape on that, but it's something that isn't really internalized, I think. And definitely by myself, like you were just saying with the captaincy, right? It's like, yeah, like, Villa can be home Leicester and they'll obviously be favored in that fixture. But Liverpool home Leicester and Villa home Leicester are very different fixtures. Like Liverpool probably wins it 95% of the time and scores 3 goals 85% of the time. Villa draws that game all the time, right? That's why they didn't make the Champions League, right? And it's like, if you just think more in those terms, it kind of reflects what you were just saying, Danny. It's like, well, yeah, Crystal Palace is home Brentford this week, but why, like, Salah's still home Brighton, and it's Salah and Liverpool, and it's like a different. We shouldn't be even comparing them, really. It's like completely different scales,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. Go on, Rich. I can see you smiling away.
Rich is revved up.
I was just thinking to myself, well, I can't remember what question I actually asked you, but it was
this one,
observations for another manager here.
We're going 5 hours, people.
Yeah, I
Buckle
know.
in. Order delivery.
But no. Well, I guess Alon, you've received some good notes there. I'm trying to think if there's anything we can give Danny.
Well, I don't even have the chat open. I'm sure there's chat stuff on there.
I don't know if anyone has any suggestions as to what we can put forward to Danny.
I certainly know some of the things I've done wrong this season. So I don't know. It's probably not that interesting, and I've done lots of things wrong, which is again, just shows you, doesn't it?
Well, how long? You guys haven't been recording like that long, right? Like when did FPL Last Resort start?
25th video, I think, and a couple of them are shorts, right? So I don't know. Game week.
I haven't seen that many. Then so I don't know your season that intimately, Danny, to know some of
the summer. You can skip that kind of Harry Potter thing that you're going to do on your Discord.
Go back and watch
Harry Potter filmathon. And go straight.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. That's going to be sick. I can't.
I mean, I've never read them, never watched them, so.
Oh, don't. Yeah, we're of a certain age now. We don't need to read.
That's how I feel. But everyone our age keeps telling me how good it is, and I'm like, I don't know. We'll see.
You've probably come to the wrong place to get Harry Potter novel talk. But yeah, watch the films.
It's very nice escapism. I'll happily watch Harry Potter one anytime. It's escapism. It's very watchable. It's good.
Absolutely cool. Okay, well, if the advice is over, I suppose Danny does me every week, to be fair, in that respect, so we're good there. I'll cut a few things out, but I'll maybe just do a little bit of a looking forward one, and then we'll look at our nasty team of the season before we kind of close. There are a few others, but let's go for where is it? Here we are. What teams? I'll put it up on the screen in a second. What teams or players do you already have an eye on for next season? So we'll be selective here, but I don't know if maybe I'll start actually, because I've been a bit quiet.
Yeah, get in there.
So I'll stick that up on the screen. What teams or players have you already got your eye on for next season? What's quite interesting here, I did have a couple of suggestions actually, but do you know that weirdly enough, the first player that sprung to mind was Cucurella? I don't know what. It's just
he's playing striker now.
It just seems so unlikely, unless they have such an awful, really nasty string of fixtures next season. So the first 3 names I wrote down, because Actually, Jared Bowen was my answer for another question, which was who was the one who got away this season, but we probably won't have time for that one. But Cucurella, Wan-Bissaka, and Sarr are the names I've written down. Sarr, because I suspect everyone is going to be assuming that he's some sort of troll status, but the reality is we're talking about someone who was getting 85, 90 minutes every game for kind of high fives in terms of value. And a ridiculous XGI, which was only behind Salah, I think, wasn't it, Danny? We talked about this a few weeks ago, but I think people were going to be potentially ignoring that one because it's we know his combinations and his relationship with Munoz and that sort of thing. But such a good pick. I think it can, and easily Eze could be 2 million clear of him when it's priced, and that will obviously be too much. So I think that's quite an interesting one. But Cucurella and to a lesser extent Wan-Bissaka are some players that I'm really interested to see their price come out, etc., because they will be really really good ones. And the other note that I've got down here before I perhaps hand on to either of you is just in terms of what squads I can see having continuity over the summer and what squads won't. And immediately I spring to mind, obviously Liverpool, Alon, you'll know more about this than me, are already doing some incredible business.
A lot of moves,
with Wirtz and Frimpong, isn't it?
Frimpong and probably Kirkez too, it seems like.
Kirkez. And then they're pretty much sorted, aren't they? They might sell, I think Kelleher has been actually linked to West Ham amongst a few other teams, so it's quite interesting.
He's great, yeah.
As well as Brentford, I think. But them and Arsenal are kind of immediately teams who spring to mind as being teams who only really need to tinker with maybe two positions.
Yeah.
And one of the players I'll bring this up just because it's mentioned, Aaron Wan-Bissaka. Yeah, he's completely different. He's incredibly aggressive, and
he might be 4-5 as well, mightn't he? He might well.
He might be. Yeah, logically, he could easily be 4-5. And
he's nailed in the team almost. Like at this point, like he's in the team. Like I don't need to say more. He's so attacking. I really like Potter, which I guess might be a hot take. I think a lot of people really don't like Potter. I like Potter. I believe in him. The style is good for cleans, that sort of like defensive possession style. And yeah, I expect him to be 4-5 and, get 6 assists or whatever again and just be good.
He'll get goals as well. He will. He's not a terrific finisher, but I could easily see him getting something like...
He's in the team.
3 goals, 8 assists or something next year. It wouldn't shock me at all. It's just the clean sheets is just is going to be the issue with there. But actually, just on West Ham, them, let's say Brentford lose Wissa and Mbeumo. There are a couple of teams who will be really interesting to see what they do over the summer, because West Ham have had the oldest squad in the Premier League for 3 seasons in a row now.
Wow.
This would be the 3rd anyway. Something like that. But the point being is they are desperately in need of an overhaul. There's a lot of old players being shipped out, and that they could go either way. They are a team that could potentially be on the brink of relegation if the one's coming up. But as you say, equally, if Potter manages to build what he wants to over the summer, and bear in mind they sacked their transfer director and all this kind of stuff, the chairman is taking control again. He's a completely clueless guy. So anything could happen there. They're an interesting one because they're one of those teams that could be 7th or 19th. Like I know there's a lot of teams like that, but that would be one. So those are the things really I'm interested in. I've named a few players, and there's just a few squads that I think that there's going to be a lot of fluctuation, and some I tend to lean more to go for picks at the start of the season where I know there's some continuity. I'm not that phased by new signings on the whole, unless I have seen that they plug into a system pretty quickly. Danny, I can see that you are in pensive thought there. Do you want to kick off next?
I'm a little bit, I've not thought about this much yet because I'm not deliberately not kind of ready to, but I do think it's interesting, and I'm thinking about I'm a little bit worried, because it's suddenly we might have all this position where we lose all these talismans. Bumo not being at Brentford would be such a seismic event in terms of FPL. Like, Jesus, wow. So this guy's gone. Cunha is going to United, it seems like. So it's another player who, if Bruno stays, he loses penalties. Does Bumo lose penalties? Where does he go? There was another one I was just thinking. I mean, even João Pedro, he's not going to be at Brighton, so we don't have suddenly this, that sort of the guy who was the best player at Brighton. He was a bit of a dickhead and it was a bit untrustworthy, but I've loved him this season, and he got me a lot of penalties, and he's a brilliant penalty taker.
Yep.
So suddenly we've got a lot of guys who are kind of talisman who maybe won't be there next season, which is very interesting and maybe more fun. So that's a big question. Cunha could be a weak spot of mine. He's someone I think of straight away because he's a ridiculous footballer. And so then suddenly, if Bruno stays, suddenly we've got a midfield. Well, no, he'll be a midfielder. He'll be a midfielder, and he'll probably be. He won't be more than 8 million. But he won't be on penalties. So that's one of them where it could be interesting because it's that could be a bit of a fun pick. That's a risky pick.
How many penalties do you think he got this year?
Probably not many. I don't even think I saw him score one, to be fair. Yeah, so you're about to tell me, was it none? Really
only team in the league with 0 pens. Wolves.
Really?
Wolves didn't win a single pen entire season.
Wow, that's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, isn't it crazy? We get a guy because he's on pens. And then that happened with me with Solanke on maybe his last year or second last year at Bournemouth. Had him for like 30 game weeks, 0 pens. He's like, all right.
Wow. That is amazing that Cunha got no pens. Wow, it just makes the pick even better. But he's been a total bonus monster as well in just terms of the way he plays. So that's another thing sort of string to his bow. And I think that probably sort of stays like that just because of the way he plays. So creative and gets fouled so many times. Bonus system will probably change with Southerns as well anyway.
Oh, God.
God knows. It could be very different next week, by the way. So I don't think many people have speculated on that yet. But Mark Southerns taking over is a big deal.
I didn't know anything about that. This is like public news.
Yeah, I mean, they've not said like that taking over is a bit strong, but he is essentially he's like the guy who, in a room full of people who don't know much about fantasy football but organize the game, they've decided to employ someone who's an expert at fantasy football to make all of the big decisions and advise and tell us what to do. They basically
That's
said,
huge.
Can you have this job to come and tell us what to do with this game? So it is huge. It is huge.
It really is, yeah.
Pros and cons. We could talk about that another time, I suppose, potentially anyway, in terms of speculating on what you might do. But yeah, so I think Cucurella is a fantastic shout, absolutely great, and I think Wan-Bissaka is a great shout because if he's 4-5, which I think he probably will be,
has to be.
Of course. I mean, it's very likely, isn't it? So
yeah,
you can see it in this day and age. Even if he starts with like 3 bad fixtures, he'll be in a lot of teams because people just play ahead like that, and he'll be on the benches for people. I can see him being really template. Because you expect Potter to step up as well, don't you? Just because he's a great manager, or at least that's what he's shown so far. And West Ham have been good the last few weeks, so yeah, love that. Other than that, yeah, I can't think of any obvious players. You guys will probably have thought of that more than me. United will be my weak spot, I suppose, because I expect them to be underpriced, and we don't have Europe, and it'll still be one of those. I mean, it must be the last like 3 or 4 seasons in a row. I've like put too much faith in Man United players, and they've totally fucked me over. So I'm sure that'll happen again this season. What about you, Alan? Does anyone jump out?
Well, I like all the shouts so far. I definitely like Sarr also a lot. I agree with you. I think Eze will go up a lot. I'm curious if Mateta will also kind of stay the same price because, after the ear injury, he kind of like barely scored for the rest of the season, and he's great, and before this season was the Olympics, right? So he hasn't had a break in 2.5 seasons basically. So the summer off and recovery, and he'll probably come in and just be great.
I find it hard to trust Palace though.
They were terrible at the beginning of the season.
They're just so all or nothing, aren't they? With Glasner, they seem to take so long to get going, and once they get going, they're unbelievable. But you just never know when that's going to happen. I don't know.
It's true. I mean, I'm always looking at players who I think will get big price hikes and go down in price a lot, like we talked about earlier. And one of those guys is Son. I mean, he was still 10 million this year. And he was awful, and Spurs were awful. But I also think he was just hurt all year. I mean, he had a groin thing, he had a hernia thing. It just playing through pain. Yeah, go ahead.
You're exactly right. But this is really significant. I think is obviously the manager.
The manager.
There's no player that suffered more from Ange, in my opinion, than Son. What Son needs is exactly what Salah got this season.
Exactly. Cherry picking, no tracking back, no pressing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's such a shame for Son because I think he could have at least 2 or if not 3. I mean, he's really fit. He's one of those late developers. Look how young he looks.
Yeah.
He could have at least 2 or 3 brilliant, sensational seasons
Yep.
as an attacking midfielder who wasn't forced to track back, just like Salah. And so
Totally.
if Ange goes, he's back in the picture. If Ange is there, I mean, one thing I will say about Spurs is that's probably the only time of the season if Ange is there that they might be half decent because they will probably be fitter than others just for the ridiculous regime that they've gone. So that and we saw that a little bit this season with Porro doing well game week 1 and a few others and Solanke maybe. And then they die after a few weeks and they'll die.
Exactly.
So,
I mean, we're forgetting he scored 213 points in 23-24 season. 17 goals, 10 assists. He was a monster, and on pens, and 90 every game. You know, so
he was Golden Boot the year before that, or the one before. He was joint Golden Boot with Salah.
So you know, he could be 8-5. I don't think that would be shocking at all. Or 9.
It'll be ludicrous if they keep Ange, in my opinion, and that might be.
I agree. No, I agree.
Absolutely, it'll be hilarious and ludicrous.
I agree. And then the other one that I had, because Walsh and I also talked about this last night, was Ahmad on the Man United note. I mean, I think if he didn't get hurt, he probably would have gone up like 1.5 million or something and had more goals. And everyone remembers the hat trick. And I think he wasn't even playing wing when he scored the hat trick. I think he was wing back that game. And then he just kind of didn't play for 10 straight game weeks. But I don't know how much they can raise his price. He certainly won't be 5 again, but is he going to be 6 with no Europe, starting right winger every game? Garnacho's out of there, right? So it's not even, there's no competition there. I mean, that's going to be hard to not go, unless their fixtures are just an absolute nightmare and they buy another right winger to compete with him or something like that, where it just looks dicey. I mean, I think that he could really be a game week 1, like, long-term hold kind of guy because they'll be so cheap.
You're forgetting about the return of Anthony. Yeah.
Oh God, was that a loan?
I thought it was a loan.
Yeah, maybe it was. Oh God, please no.
Sancho
and Anthony.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Did they leave?
And Rash. I mean, he's not gone yet.
Yeah, I mean, this just gets me. I know. I'll just say very quickly about Amorim, and it's what Walsh was saying.
Oh yeah, you love him.
I know Richie's getting a bit. I know we're about to break all records for the longest ever pod, and Richie's getting a bit itchy, and
I need to go to bed.
It's the light out.
Yeah, I mean, I listened to FML this week because Walsh I think was spot on about Amorim. I totally agree with his view on him, but he called him psychotic, but it is hilarious actually. I love the ruthlessness of these players who have been dickheads for ages. But did you hear what apparently with Garnacho actually in front of the whole team? Did you hear that? That's what he said.
Something like, you better hope a team wants you or something, right?
Yeah. Apparently, he actually said you better hope someone wants to sign you this summer because you ain't playing here again, pal. And you know what? I love that because
I love that. Yeah,
I like that.
Everyone's first reaction to that is, "Oh my God! Oh God, that's horrible! Oh, poor Garnacho!" And it's like, no, hang on a minute. The guy's a man, and he's gone into interviews and he's piping off about himself after losing the European Cup final, and he's got lessons to learn in life. And it's not that big a deal. It's not that big a deal if you fuck up and you get told by the boss to get lost. Yeah. Great stuff. I love that. Refreshing. You get told and get going because I'm not interested in having him there. So I love that from Amorim.
I think it is. It's another Walshism for you. He always says like, this isn't a democracy. This is a dictatorship. There's one leader. So if you don't get in line, you get out. I mean, people forget that, because everyone like Klopp is so like charismatic and Pep can be too in his own like funny, weird guy way, but they were the same when they got there, right? I mean, Klopp again, like the charisma and public speaking and stuff, he's much better at that kind of stuff, I think, than Amorim. But there was Sacco and God, I can't think of other guys, Sturridge, and there were tons of guys. But my point is that were in this very bad Liverpool squad when Klopp got there that were just immediately out. They were just excommunicated. This guy's not good enough. He's not listening. He was late to training, out of the team immediately. And I think, the culture change is a very important thing for, the success of a club. So I'm with you there.
Cool. Okay, I was going to give Danny you just like a very quick segment here on your right to reply on the bench boost 1 approach, because we probably don't have a great deal of time. I know it was covered on FML FPL, so please do listen to that and for a more kind of thorough answer. But Danny, if I can give you like 2 minutes to give your view on this, and
All right, yeah. So just
something
really
like
quick.
that.
Yeah, no, really quick. Just some thoughts. I forgot about that. In my view, there's nothing wrong. I mean, it's interesting because especially Walsh was saying it's nailed on, which is fair enough, absolutely fine. I do totally understand that, like, the bench boost is such a pain in the ass. I totally understand, all that sort of stuff and how much and the benefits of doing it. It was more about the early wild card, but for me with the bench boost game, my personal approach is that's the time of the season where when we talked earlier about having those positions and those price points, and I think when you mentioned about having not as much money, for me that's absolutely true, but it's true in a different sense. It's true in the sense that it's always very hard for me to cover those key price points and to fit in. It may be that there's a huge difference between having a 7 midfielder and a 6.5 if that's most of the good players are priced at. It's the difference between a 9.5 striker or whatever, and it's all of that sort of stuff. And I always find that it's very difficult. I would rather cover those key price points because it's not just about the price points and the flexibility. So obviously what I'm saying here is that usually ends up with a 4 million, sometimes for me even a 4 million defenders on the bench, and a 4.5 and a 4 million keeper. And for me, that's what I wouldn't want to sacrifice. It's not just the flexibility of being able to switch to different players because of those price points. It's also the flexibility to stay on top of the early price rises early season, which is becoming more powerful. It's something I did more this season. Again, with the game, so much content, and there aren't many edges that you can get. One of them is that you can, with the right structure for me and with the right players, is get on good price rises early on. So that was one point in terms of the bench boost. That's why I wouldn't do it, because for me it's more important to prioritize the first 11 in game week 1 personally. But then following on that with the wild card, and the reason why I messaged Alon earlier, said I'm a little bit worried already for Alon, and because I mean it because I'm also worried for the pod. I don't want a car crash, and of course it may well be brilliant. It may well be brilliant to bench boost, but then wild card in game week 2 or 3.
Yeah.
But obviously for me, it can be fine. It can be brilliant. Don't want anyone sort of shouting that. I can imagine late risers saying, "Oh, shut up, this it can work great for me sometimes." That's fine. But early season, I think, is so hard to take a huge amount from the first 6 or 7 weeks. There's so much about fitness, of just fitness of players.
Yeah.
It plays such a big part in the first 5 or 6 weeks where teams aren't as fit as one another, and that will dictate a lot of results. I mean, we see it with Salah as an individual all the time. He doesn't drink. He looks after himself really well. He's always super sharp. One of the reasons he's always so good game week 1 is because he's super fit, and he's just fitter than everyone else.
Totally.
It's one of the reasons he's almost nailed in my team is because he's fitter than everyone else. And you can always contrast that with the end of the season when it's Ramadan and stuff, and he always falls off a cliff because he's less fit than anyone else because he's not eating anything.
Yeah.
But fitness in the first few weeks muddies the water a little bit. So you don't really see what. That's my view in terms of. It doesn't mean that you can't play a wild card 3, but what it means is that again relating to that point about how long the season is and how many paths there are to points, it gives you an awful lot of time that allows you to be a bit safer in the first few weeks when we just see all that fitness and sort of stuff. And so both paths, a wild card 8 or a wild card 2 or 3, both paths can finish in brilliant ranks. They can both win the game. You don't need to wildcard 2 or 3 for me. But one of them is a lot more likely to end in a bit of a car crash because you've no longer got a wildcard.
Yeah.
And one of them is a safer play, for want of a better word, but can be just as successful. And that's all I wanted to say was that the kind of 2 reasons with the bench boost and the wildcard. And I've just... One of the things with Walsh is because he kind of did that last season. He did this very aggressive approach already last season. And I wonder if, actually the difference for Walsh should he for once try some kind of safe approach where he sits back and watches what happens a bit and is a bit more considered. I don't know. It's just interesting because I always like to try something different, especially if I've had a bad season. Whereas, I don't know, he's kind of doing the same thing to me. So
I mean, he had a 4-point bench boost. Obviously, game week 1 was a disaster. Then he triple capped Haaland's hat trick in game week 2. And then he wild carded in game week 3, and he was 21K after game week 3 because he absolutely flew with the triple cap and the wild card. But but then he kind of just stagnated, and then he also got rid of Mo when people got rid of Mo, and blah blah blah, and ended up just like whatever kind of forgettable season. But it did get him off to a fast start, but it's like, can you maintain that? Yeah.
Yeah, and it would. I mean, well, it wouldn't. But you would expect if you play a wild card to have a really good 2 weeks, wouldn't you? So, but it's the long play. I don't know. And again, I'm not saying it's wrong at all.
No, I hear you.
It's great. I think it's just something to think about in terms of that's what I would have said.
Yeah, it's risky. Yeah,
thanks for that, Rich. If Morse watches this, Rich, you won't. He'll be like, "Who's that twat? It doesn't even know me."
Alan was going to enjoy that thought until the end of his summer, and now it's gone.
I'm still doing it.
Okay. Okay. I'm not going to talk this through, but I did promise earlier that I would put up our kind of, but just a collection of the kind of awful picks this season, the ones that haven't made it to the list here. I mean, Raya is kind of just for me and Danny, probably because even though we had him and we felt it was sensible, it felt horrible most of the time.
And he was horrible. It's not just for you. He was horrible. I think it's like underrated how bad he was this season in FPL. I mean, he started. We mentioned it earlier, right? He had that insane start of not just cleans, but saves and bonus points, right? I looked at it last night. I remember. I think he went 8, 10, 2, 9, 4 first 5 games, right? So 33 in the first 5 games.
Wow.
And then he had 109 points in the next 33 games. Like, that is awful. That's relegated keeper or promoted keeper kind of points per game.
Yeah, and I had him basically all season. And I remember one of the only times I didn't have him was game week 24 or whatever it was, when I switched to Allison for the double game week.
Oh God!
The week before, fucking Raya got a 9-pointer. It was one of the most annoying things that happened this season. And Allison, was it against Leicester? He conceded in the 94th minute. Was it Leicester or Ipswich?
Yep.
It was Leicester.
It was. I think it was a Leicester corner. Or no, it was an Ipswich corner. It was Reeves or something.
Reeves,
In the 94th minute, and that was the only time Raya got any points, and that was the only game week in pretty much. It was about one of about. And the first 4 game weeks, that game week and a couple of cleans were the only weeks I didn't own him. Absolute joke. Never again.
That's so shit.
So there are some obvious kind of names here, which we've already talked through, Foden and Kunku and so on. But there's a couple of people that I just want to throw out there as being under the radar rubbish this year. Odegaard. No one. I know that everyone, he often gets missed, but the reality is he had an absolutely dreadful season for someone who was kind of over 8 million and someone who was in a title challenging team and all the rest of it. So that does need putting there. Robertson, we know that no assists until the last game. Davis, I think people were kind on him because obviously he plays for a dreadful team and the rest of it, but I think that needs pulling out as well because he had an absolute shocker of a season and actually didn't look very good anyway. Couple of players here are personal trolls of mine. Solanke, I transferred him out before his 16-pointer home to Aston Villa. Yeah, that was one of the lows of the season. Garnacho's been mentioned because he obviously so much potential, but that never happened. By the way, I don't know if you want to throw any more names into this, but I'm just going to put a couple of my own here.
Well, can I throw in Gabriel while we're talking about Odegaard and Raya?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Often forgotten because he was so good the first half of the season. That's when he scored all of his goals and everything. Yeah. If you guys remember, is every week they're going to get a corner, they're going to get a goal. He didn't score or assist from game week 18 onwards, and Arsenal weren't that good and keeping that many cleans. He was bad. He was just straight up a very bad pick if you got him after that stretch of goals.
Yeah, great shot.
Yeah.
The other one I'm going to put forward here, just as a West Ham one, is Kudus, because I often listen to lots of other podcasts where they're like, oh, if you can't afford Bowen, he's a nice punt as well. I'm like, at no point. He's such a talented player. Really could easily play for him and Paquetá are 2 players that if they had their mentality straight and they were consistent, they could play for almost anyone. But they, he as an FPL asset, Kudus is absolutely dreadful. I know he scored in the last week, but I do think he kind of needs a note there, even though I like him as a player, etc. Any names from you, Danny?
Oh my God. Who's really...
Shout out to Rico, obviously our favourite.
Yeah, I mean, there's been trolls for others. I can't think of many trolls for me, but then I think I just erase these things from my mind because there's been loads. There's been absolutely loads. But yeah, Gabriel was one of the ones I was going to say, and Raya. I mean, these are the guys who, and I sort of want to say Palmer. He's not been a troll. I know we've talked about Palmer loads,
Yeah.
but I did hold him for a lot longer than most, and I do think he had a massive confidence issue, by the way, which I do think was resolved as well. I think which was incredible to me. I do think, and I think that that was a big thing. But obviously, it's the way Chelsea play as well. Now they're much more defensive. His role has changed. That's obviously for sure. But it's just that everybody said, "Oh, he's gone crap," and actually, even the last few weeks, I thought he played really well. He didn't get the returns, but he was playing much better after that moment where I was kind of said when that confidence changed. So that'll be interesting next season if the same manager. I guess he's less of a pick now just because of the style of play. But no, you'll have to go, Rich, because I can't. You've put me on the spot, and I can't think of.
No, it's fine. I'll just put this comment up from my 1974. I was expecting 15 United shirts to appear.
Fair, yeah.
The only other names that I was thinking of that people have sent in, Vicario. I think he got 4 clean sheets for the whole season, which is obviously pretty awful. Areola, Barco and Purvis. Barco I couldn't put on there anyway because he's not in the game.
Not even in the game. Yeah.
Jota, people have said maybe is. I mean, it's not. It's a minute's risk anyway. I think generally, so it's hard to put him in there. But Martinelli, I think, is a little bit of a cheeky one as well because you would have expected that to be a bit better as well. But
I mean, it's so team to team, right? I'm sure there's people who had Jota an average 8 points per game in their team because they got him at the right time, and other people average 1 point per game, right? Like I know Cunha was so amazing for everyone. He averaged 0.5 points per start in my team. He was absolutely diabolical for me. He was the worst pick in my team all season, probably. Eze too. I had Eze 2 different times, and it gave me 15 and gave me 22, and he was kind of like hurt and not taking pens when we thought he had pens and just missing huge chances. He averaged 2.5 points per game, and I played him 6 times. And for everyone else, he was like incredible at the end of the season.
I mean, I suppose before kind of closing that debate, if we are, maybe we should come back to this every season if we are doing this for a while. Danny, is the worst FPL pick of the season? I mean, is it just Foden?
Yeah, it's Foden. That's Foden, absolutely. Yeah, I just want to say quickly, because I was just looking through my team. Enzo was one for me. It was a big troll.
Oh yeah, Walsh too. He got Walsh.
Okay,
Yeah, he was a big troll because he did loads and then did nothing. It was really weird. I don't remember. It's so weird. I didn't remember until I looked back. I was looking through my team, going through the weeks. I didn't realize that I owned Jamie Vardy for about 6 weeks, and he got like a good few goals for me.
Did you really?
Yeah,
I can't remember that at all.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I only owned him 1 week, and I captained him, and he got an 8-pointer and gave me 37. So. In my team, he was great, but
nice.
There you go. We've got to a mammoth. I'm trying to. You could probably have squeezed in a Godfather film. On this
honestly, Alan, so sorry. I feel so bad.
No, I had a blast. My girlfriend's probably mad at you. Apologize to her. The door's closed. She's sitting out there.
Well, yeah, you might be right.
I feel widows.
It'll never be as long as this again, promise.
No problem.
It's a thing, FPL widows, yeah. But yeah, I mean, this is a regular working day for Alan, so we will send you a fruit basket or whatever it is.
Thank you.
It's going to be quite expensive across the
just put it on a boat and hope it doesn't rot.
Well, I mean, thank you again for joining us, Alan. It's always a
pleasure.
A pleasure. We hope you visit us again at some point or another as well.
I hope so too.
And we'll do it again. We're gonna take a little bit of a break over the summer, as you can imagine. And there are a few things that we're doing. We want to sort out a few things for next year. A moderator for the chat, so that I don't have to sort of look at various screens all at once. And perhaps we'll sort out a few new things to make it look a bit snappier and that sort of thing. So we'll try and do that.
Cool.
As well. But yeah, make sure you do follow this again. Both there's 2 Alon podcasts. Remember, it's FML, FPL, but also remind me the gaming podcast,
Wide Flank.
Wide Flank. So I mean that's go straight there after this. I'm only part way through From Russia with Love, so I'll be
3 hours, not long enough. Go get some more pods in there.
Go get some more, yeah, something like that.
Anyone driving, across country or something.
Nice.
I'll get the timestamps on as soon as I can, so that people don't just see the 2 hours 50 and just like run away.
Yeah, sounds fair. Cool. Okay. Well, everyone should enjoy their summer. Go over to Alon's Discord to get some Harry Potter films in, and I'm sure you can find other things to do with your life. I suddenly remember when I get to the summer, as I'm smarter than I think I am during the season, because I suddenly read books again and smell fresh air and give myself room to breathe in different ways. So hopefully that will happen again. There you go. But yeah, I'm Nice74 in the chat. Fixtures on the 18th of June, so we've only got 3 weeks before something enters the peripherals of our brain. Okay, right, wait, we'll say goodbye. Have a good evening, all. Thank you very much for joining us, and it was a pleasure to have you as for the. This is our first season, of course, so hopefully you'll join us next season as well, and hit all the various buttons, smash them.
Smash.
Have a good summer.
Nice one, boys.
Adios.